This is Simpsons history for sleep. Kick back, settle down, and let me tell you the entire backstory of Season 4 of The Simpsons, which is, in my opinion, the best season they ever did. Let's get started. Camp Crusty, Season 4, Episode 1 of The Simpsons. Originally aired on September the 24th, 1992. The story of how it came together starts with a simple, almost universal kid fantasy. Summer camp promises freedom and fun, and then, yikes. Writer David M. Stern built the episode around that bait and switch, and showrunners Al Jean and Mike Rice leaned into a gleeful contrast. While the kids suffer in the woods, Homer's life gets mysteriously better at home. Mark Kirkland directed, giving the camp a grimy, lived-in feel that came from real memories of janky cabins and suspicious wiring. It's The Simpsons at its most economical. One idea, two mirrored worlds, tons of jokes. On the page, the first table read, "Didn't sing." There's a great writer's room war story about this one. The read falls flat, people are worried, so the staff decamps for a late night rewrite. The fix was to push everything harder. The camp had to be truly awful. The counsellors truly tyrannical. And back in Springfield, Homer had to be so blissed out without the kids that even his hair sprouts back and his waistline retreats. Out of that sprint came the episode's wonderful emotional engine. Bart's unshakable faith that Krusty will rescue him, and Lisa's clear-eyed letters home that this is less hike and more grim death march. The whole thing snaps into place when you remember the core idea was always the contrast. There's another famous fork in the road. James L. Brooks loved the premise so much he floated turning it into a Simpsons movie. The trouble? The story was hilariously short. They were struggling to make it to 18 minutes, let alone 80, and you can hear the wry logic from the writer's side. If it can't fill an episode, it sure can't sustain a feature. The practical solution became part of the episode's charm. The camp song, "Hail to Thee, Camp Crusty," gets lengthened to pad time, and somehow that makes the satire land even harder. The faux wholesome anthem stretched over a truly terrible camp. Production-wise, Camp Crusty sits at a crossroads for the show. It's a holdover from the previous production cycle, stamped with code 8F24, and it's the last episode domestically animated by Klasky Choupeau before the series moved to film Roman. That behind-the-scenes switch mattered. It reflected both evolving ambitions for the show's look and feel, and some very real labour and production concerns in the early 90s Los Angeles animation scene. You can watch Camp Crusty as the end of one era, and the confident launch of Season 4's hot streak. The cast chemistry does a lot of the lifting. Dan Castellaneta gets to play both sides of a joke that had been brewing for years, the weird Homer Krusty mirroring, by voicing the real Krusty and the fake one, Barney in makeup, and his throaty Krusty rasp sells both showbiz bluster and sheepish guilt. Nancy Cartwright's Bart is pure propulsion here, ricocheting from desperate grade fudging to revolutionary zeal. Yeardley Smith's Lisa provides the humane, horrified counterpoint. And the episode gives the bullies, Jimbo, Dolph and Kearney, room to shine as pint-sized tyrants, brought to life by regulars Pamela Hayden, Tress MacNeille and Nancy Cartwright. Over them all, the silky menace of Mr. Black, voiced by Harry Shearer, sets the tone. He's a bland corporate smoothie who actually toasts gentlemen to evil and means it. Marcia Wallace is in the mix too, as ever, as the world-weary Mrs. Crabapple who helps Bart get those grades just barely into camp eligible. If you're looking for the writer's fingerprints, look at the details. Krusty brand imitation gruel with its dreadful label joke. The Dickensian sweatshop where kids stitch wallets for export. The ersatz Krusty reveal. It's Barney, of course, imploding the camper's last hope. On TV back home, Krusty is off living large in London, heckling Ivan Lendl at Wimbledon and generally avoiding responsibility. When the ruse collapses and the kids realise they've been conned, Bart's faith curdles into action. He leads the revolt, turns the sign to Camp Bart, and the satire completes its circle. A children's rebellion makes more moral sense than the grown-ups running the place. Kirkland's visual gags pay off big. The sweatshop beat with Kearney pounding a drum, riffing on Ben-Hur's slave galleys, has that perfect Simpsons blend of old movie pastiche and kid world horror. Homer's home makeover sequence, in contrast, is all elastic cartoon logic. Fewer kids equals less stress, equals instant weight loss and lush hair. The cross-cutting sells the joke every time we jump from a sunny, svelte Homer to Lisa's terrified letters. It's brisk, clear storytelling. You always know where the episode's heart, and its sense of right and wrong resides. And then Krusty returns. The confession is classic Krusty. They drove a dump truck full of money up to my house. I'm not made of stone. He's ashamed, he's implicated, and he's still Krusty. So he does the most Krusty thing possible and buys absolution with a giant trip. The coda is a montage scored to South of the Border, crooned in a Sinatra style by Gene Molino, as the kids and the clown blow off steam in Tijuana. It's a warm, goofy grace note after the camp's grey misery, the rare Simpsons ending where everybody actually gets a vacation. There are a few inside baseball touches fans love to point out. When Krusty introduces Mr. Black to the campers via a videotape, the name Mr. Black is obviously dubbed in. A cheap post-production gag that doubles as a joke about cheap branding. The gag works even better once you know Shearer is voicing the villain, because his smooth, civic leader cadence is the entire joke. And Mr. Black's exit, fleeing by hydrofoil, ended up being an unintentional series farewell for the character. The writers joked later that the hydrofoil basically carried him right out of the show forever. Even the opening and couch gag choices telegraph ambition. The blackboard reads, "This punishment is not boring and pointless," which is exactly the kind of meta-jab Season 4 loved, and the couch gag finds the Flintstones already on the sofa. A quick, cheeky way to nod at TV animation lineage, while announcing that this crew is ready to carry the torch. It's also a confident way to start what many consider one of the show's greatest seasons. In the ratings, the confidence was rewarded. The premiere pulled a hefty Nielsen number and was Fox's top show that week, which, for a series reinventing itself on the production side, is about as sweet as a Krusty-branded victory gets. And the legacy, beyond all the quotable lines, Kent Brockman's "I've been to Vietnam, Afghanistan and Iraq" hyperbole. The campers chanting "Burn, Krusty, burn." The episode planted seeds the series would revisit decades later with a direct sequel. But Camp Crusty endures because it's pure, concentrated Simpsons. A kid-eye view of a corrupted institution, a clown with a conscience that can be bought and sold, and a family whose dysfunction resolves into genuine love the second the world gets a little kinder. That they had to stretch a silly camp song to make time is the most Simpsons production anecdote of all. Turning necessity into a joke, and the joke into something you still remember. If you rewatch it now, you can feel both the show and its world levelling up. The satire's sharper, the animation's surer, the ensemble's tighter. And tucked beneath the rebellion and the gruel and the gentleman to evil toast is a tiny, hopeful thesis. When the adults sell you out, sometimes the kids fix it themselves. And a clown, properly motivated, might just do the right thing in the end. A Streetcar Named Marge, Season 4, Episode 2 of The Simpsons, originally aired on October 1st, 1992. The backstage story on this one starts with a writer who loves show tunes. Jeff Martin had been pitching a theatre episode idea since the early days, and you can feel that musical DNA in every beat. The concept took shape when the staff realised that Marge playing Blanche Dubois wasn't just funny, it was emotionally on point. If Homer can sometimes be Marge's lovable but oblivious Stanley, then a musicalised Streetcar lets you do two things at once. Lampoon community theatre while quietly giving Marge a place to say out loud what she often swallows. That was the hook. Once the room locked onto that, Martin did what he does. He wrote songs that play like Broadway parodies but still move the story. And he packed the script with references that would make Williams scholars grin and 8-year-olds laugh. Casting the juice into the jokes is half the battle, and this episode stacks the deck. John Lovitz strides in as Llewellyn Sinclair, the volcanic community theatre director who speaks in notes and tantrums, and then, in a beautiful bit of farce, he also plays his own sister, the iron-fisted head of the Ayn Rand School for Tots. Phil Hartman sprinkles platinum around the edges as both Troy McClure and Lionel Hutz, and the regular cast cannily tilts their voices to fit the heightened stage world. You can hear the writers cackling as Ned Flanders, of all people, bare chests his way through Stanley. It's such a perfect Springfield logic. The gentlest guy in town gets to bellow, "Stella!" because that's who shows up to community theatre auditions. From the first table read, the team knew the episode would live or die on the two tracks working in counterpoint. Track 1 is Marge battling for Blanche against a director who thinks she's too meek, right up until Homer's inattentiveness proves she's exactly right for the role. Track 2 is Maggie's breakout movie, staged like The Great Escape for babies. That daycare subplot wasn't just a gag delivery system, it's the episode's stunt sequence. The baby prison box, the ball bouncing against the wall, the stealthy pacifier heist, all set to that rousing march. The crew didn't just spoof the movie, they secured the actual music and charts, which gives the set piece a grand, old Hollywood swell that makes the visual jokes feel bigger and somehow sweeter. It's also a flex from a production team that by season 4 knew how to stage long, complicated sequences without losing clarity. Long and complicated is a good way to describe the animator's week too. Director Rich Moore had to wrangle crowd scenes for the show within the show, and coordinate the timing of a whole Tiny Tots caper, plus stage a recognisable streetcar on an animated community theatre budget. The boards were dense, the third act is basically a continuous performance, and there were enough background faces to populate half of Springfield. It pushed the schedule. It also sharpened the gags. The more you feel the logistics of a local production, tinny lighting cues, civic centre decor, townspeople in borrowed costumes, the funnier every "oh bless their hearts" they're doing Streetcar joke lands. Of course, the episode's most famous backstage wrinkle was a song that got out into the world a little too early. One of the numbers, a brassy scene setter about New Orleans, was written as a Sondheim-style roast, like There's No Place Like London in Sweeney Todd, a loving city sketch with barbs. But before the episode aired, the lyrics hit print, stripped of tone or context. Cue phone lines lighting up at the local Fox affiliate, and a quick course in how satire plays when you can't hear the music. The show apologised the way The Simpsons always apologises, through a joke, slapping "I will not defame New Orleans" on the very next week's chalkboard gag, and moving on. Today, you can watch the song as intended and see the wink. In the moment, the production learned a very early internet age lesson about how a lyric reads versus how it sings. Lovitz, as always, is the accelerant. Llewellyn Sinclair is a sort of role that only works if the actor can turn from velvet to razor mid-sentence, and Lovitz does it twice. First as the martinet director, then as his sister, who rules a nursery with objectivist slogans like A is A and helping is futile framed on a wall. It's not just a philosophy riff, it's a terrific character engine for Maggie's story. And that's another hallmark of this era of the show. The baby's plot is silent, but never small. Watch how the action beats in that daycare track mirror Marge's arc. Both stories are about claiming back something that was taken, whether it's a pacifier or a little corner of self-respect. Musically, the team goes for broke, especially in the final performance. Oh, Streetcar plays like a community troupe, overselling its most ambitious number of the season. Lots of vibrato, a few too many dancers, and exactly the right amount of heart. And then there are the smart Alec film nods baked in around the edges. A Hitchcock silhouette strolls by with his dogs, a quick Citizen Kane wink in the opera-level staging, and of course the famous low-angle Stella reprise for Homer that ties the parody back to the marriage. It all adds up to a rhythm the show really perfects this year. Jokes every few seconds, but never at the expense of a character beat. Behind the scenes, there's a tiny quirk fans love to spot. When Krusty introduces the daycare head on video as Ms. Sinclair, you can hear the post-dub wobble on the name, a deliberately cheap cut that doubles as a gag about last-minute rebranding. There were storyboard bits that didn't make it, an extra comeuppance for Mrs. Sinclair that survives on the DVD animatic, and a lot of retiming in the final act to keep the musical performance legible. That last stretch, from backstage jitters to the curtain call embrace, feels unusually live for a cartoon because the production bent itself around letting the show play like actual theatre. And then there's the spine that makes it all hang together. Marge wants Homer to notice her, and Homer doesn't until he does. The lighting cue that finds him in the audience, rapt, finally hearing what she's been trying to tell him for years, lands because the writers haven't cheated him into enlightenment. They let the performance earn it. It's not a grand reconciliation, just a small, funny, human moment in which a husband realises his wife is more complicated and capable than he remembered. On a series built from elastic sarcasm, those grounded emotional payoffs are what make the set-piece satire sing. For a production team in transition, new season, evolving pipelines, bigger ambitions, A Streetcar Named Marge is a calling card. It's an episode with a foot in two worlds. The daffy civic stage where Springfield bluffs its way through the American canon, and the sharper, more confident Simpsons that can spin a Broadway pastiche, a baby prison break, and a marriage check-in into one clean arc. The songs are sticky, the gags are dense, the references delightfully nerdy. But the reason it keeps popping up on favourite episode lists is simpler. A blue-haired mum gets to be the star for a night, and the town, finally including her husband, stands up and applauds. Sources for this episode, production credits, air date and commentary details. Origin of the 1776 pitch, and the decision to centre Marge as Blanche. The Great Escape sequence and music clearance. The New Orleans song controversy, and the next week chalkboard apology. An animation / behind the scenes. Anecdotes are supported by episode guides and DVD commentary summaries. Homer the Heretic, Season 4, Episode 3 of The Simpsons, originally aired on October 8th, 1992. The episode's origin is almost impishly simple. If Homer versus Lisa and the Eighth Commandment got so much comic mileage out of one biblical rule, why not try another? In the writer's room, Al Jean joked to Mike Rice that they should go back to the commandments. And out of that came the deliciously transgressive idea of Homer skipping church, then having the best day of his life. They handed it to George Meyer, a lapsed Catholic with a knack for finding the hilarious human middle ground between satire and sincerity. Meyer's first drafts leaned into a key constraint. Whenever Homer meets God, it has to be a dream. So Homer keeps nodding off. So often that early passes made him look borderline narcoleptic. But that rule of the world turns into a running gag and a framing device for the episode's gentle theology. God will meet Homer where he is, on his couch, in his bathrobe, as long as Homer meets his neighbours where they are, too. From the cast outward, the show plays this small domestic rebellion like a holiday. Dan Castellaneta rides a perfect lazy Sunday rhythm. Pancakes the size of hubcaps, the sacred ritual of not putting on pants, and that underwear dance to short shorts, a needle drop that bounces both the gag and its risky business echo. Harry Shearer counterbalances him beautifully as an avuncular, slightly weary god who's more amused than wrathful, and then flips to the pure rectitude of Flanders and the sonorous patience of Reverend Lovejoy. Julie Kavner keeps the story tethered to home. Marge's prayers for Homer aren't scolding so much as protective. And the bench is deep. Hank Azaria's Apu, cast as chief of Springfield's volunteer firefighters, becomes the linchpin of the third act rescue, while Krusty, Wiggum, and Barney stumble into heroism with the same shambolic civic pride that runs through the town. The credits say it plainly. This is a repertory company at the top of its powers, with Shearer voicing God, Lovejoy, Flanders, and Brockman in a single reel and making each sharply distinct. Jim Reardon directs it like a mission statement for the new production era. Homer the Heretic is the first episode animated domestically at Film Roman, with the overseas work handled by the newly formed Rough Draft Studios. And you can feel a looseness and snap in the physical comedy, the way Homer's body surrenders to the couch, the buoyant timing of the fire rescue chaos, the dream walk with God through cotton candy clouds. That production handoff is an inflection point in the show's look, and this half hour embraces it. More elastic poses, more confident staging, more headroom for visual grace notes like steam curling from a pancake stack or smoke snaking under a door. Meyer's script is famously clean. Act 1 sets the stakes with a single brutal winter morning. Act 2 lets Homer articulate his "I'm not a bad guy" creed, and Act 3 pays it off when his house goes up in flames and the community he's been shrugging off shows up to carry him out. That ending isn't God's vengeance, Lovejoy argues. It's God working through neighbours, Christian, Jew, and miscellaneous, which earns one of the series' best interfaith rim shots via Apu's Hindu. There are 700 million of us. The moral lands because it's baked into the action. Homer's private bliss can't be truly private. Even the king of the couch needs the town. Behind the scenes, the episode has two legendary little production quirks. One is the five-fingered god. Everywhere else in Springfield, characters have 4 fingers. God shows up with 5, a choice that launched years of fan exegesis. The prosaic truth is funnier. The 5 digits were a production choice, oversight, and in the very last shot, someone accidentally drew him back with 4. If you freeze frame the closing walk and talk, you can see the continuity goof as the credits begin to roll. The second quirk is that ecstatic cut to black on the line, "The meaning of life is," which was designed to be smothered by a Fox promo voiceover for the next show. A meta joke about sanctity and scheduling. On at least some broadcasts, no promo stepped on it, which makes the bit even drier. The universe itself declines to answer Homer's question. Another deep cut. The third act dream includes a throwaway tableau of Jimi Hendrix and Benjamin Franklin whacking an air hockey puck in heaven. Hendrix originally had a line, but it died late because the imitation didn't ring true. Franklin's quip survived because, as the team joked, nobody knows what Ben Franklin actually sounded like. It's a perfect snapshot of the show's audio exactitude in this era. If a celebrity voice couldn't land, they'd rather leave the joke silent. Little trims like that kept the pace humming, especially in an episode whose rhythms depend on ease. Homer's perfect day is a loop of small satisfactions. Dozing, snacking, flipping channels that only work if the episode can catch its breath with him. Culturally, the half hour is also a stealth coda to the previous week's mini-controversy. A Streetcar Named Marge included a brassy New Orleans song that rubbed folks the wrong way when lyrics leaked in print. As a wry olive branch, Bart's blackboard this week reads, "I will not defame New Orleans," a one-line corporate apology delivered in character. If you were following closely in 1992, it was a wink that said the show could jab and genuflect at the same time, and then get back to jokes. Reardon's set pieces are crisp. The Winter from Hell cold open sells Homer's choice. The dream meetings with God carry a stately calm that throws Homer's schlubby curiosity into relief. And the fire sequence does the practical action movie beats: smoke, blocked exits, collapsing floor, without losing the show's antic warmth. There's even a tiny continuity flex in the church scenes. The furnace issues pay off visually when the doors freeze shut, making Marge's put on a brave face church going feel like a trial. You'll also spot the couch gag. One couch slides into the wall and is replaced by an identical empty one, which plays like a cartoonist's version of "The world keeps turning," while Homer briefly opts out. Table Read Law says this script popped right away, unusual in an era where many first reads were sluggish. The team could already see the third act's imagery, the fire, the rescue, the dream walk, playing big. That early confidence seems to have rippled through post. The animation switch didn't wobble the tone. The new studios found the show's speed, and the score and song cues clicked into place, right down to that giddy short shorts burst. Season 4 often gets called the series' most complete season. Part of that reputation is how episodes like this balance cynicism and community without blinking. And then there's the performance spine that makes it all evergreen. Castellaneta pours tenderness into Homer's "I work hard and I love my kids" plea. Kavanagh lets Marge's faith be both sincere and flexible. Shearer threads a version of God who can banter about football and still gently shepherd Homer back to church. The last image, Homer asleep and snoring through the sermon, lands as the neatest little compromise. He'll show up with his family, even if he can't help being himself. That's the spiritual math of the episode and the series. Flawed people, a flawed town, and the best version of both arriving when the doors are open and the neighbours rush in. On paper, it's a story about skipping church. On screen, it's one of the best arguments for why you might go anyway. Lisa the Beauty Queen, Season 4, Episode 4 of The Simpsons, originally aired on October 15th, 1992. The premise is disarmingly simple and painfully relatable. Lisa's confidence gets kneecapped by a cruel caricature at a school carnival, and Homer, equal parts oaf and deeply earnest dad, tries to fix it by entering her in a children's beauty pageant. A scheme that ends up revealing as much about Springfield's adult hypocrisies as it does about Lisa's backbone. On the production side, it's a Jeff Martin script under Al Jean and Mike Rice's showrunning, with Mark Kirkland directing. The episode sits early in the 9F production run, and you can feel the staff hitting a Season 4 stride where the jokes are fast, but the emotions land with a soft thud in the chest. The seed of the story has an almost documentary crispness because it borrows from Martin's own teenage gigs. He really did draw caricatures at Houston's Astroworld, and he actually sketched the lopsided Lisa you see on screen, which is why the humiliation rings so true while the gag stays light on its feet. Even the raffle prize that tees up Homer's sacrifice, the coveted ride in the Duff blimp, comes straight out of Martin's real school raffles, which makes Homer selling his blimp ticket to pay Lisa's entry fee feel less like cartoon logic and more like a dad move that would absolutely happen in the wild. The Carnival cold open also lets the show yank on another real-world thread. A tight little bit where the blue-haired lawyer, representing Disney, threatens Skinner over borrowing the happiest place on earth slogan. A needle into corporate litigiousness that nods to the late 80s daycare lawsuit kerfuffle without slowing down the jokes. From there, the A story becomes a classic Lisa arc, with Yeardley Smith doing delicate, deceptively tough work. The writers like her because she isn't ruled by impulse, which makes her pain sharper and her recoveries earned. And the commentary room all but swoons about how much heart Smith can pack into a single crack in the voice. Around her, the episode builds a little industry of pageant satire. Krusty breaks out his "I heartily endorse this event" or product shill voice, riffing on old-school pitchman culture, while the production stages a surprisingly large-scale pageant finale full of crowds and quick costume beats that, by Kirkland's own telling, is the sort of sequence that makes a director feel woozy counting all the backgrounders. The key foil is Amber Dempsey, a preternaturally polished 9-year-old with weaponized eyelashes, voiced by Lona Williams, who at the time was a writer's assistant on the show and, crucially, a former pageant kid. She even handed Martin a tape of her competition days with the caveat he never show it to anyone, which explains why Amber's micro-mannerisms, those rhythmic blinks, the stage smile that never quite reaches the eyes, feel eerily specific. Williams would later write the cult pageant satire Drop Dead Gorgeous, tying this episode to a whole subgenre of American kitsch. But in the moment, she's simply nailing the part the story needs. The show also snags a time capsule cameo. Bob Hope, then 89, turns up in a USO bit at Fort Springfield, introducing the newly crowned Little Miss Springfield. Martin and a very excited Conan O'Brien drove to Hope's house to record him, and the animators dialed his on-screen look back a few decades to his Vietnam-era persona, so the jokes match the voice fans hear in their heads. That USO scene is a compact masterclass in the staff's movie brat DNA. The soldiers, furious they were promised the adult Miss Springfield, riot and force Lisa, and hope to escape by helicopter. A nifty little apocalypse, now wink, floated in on a few seconds of staging and smoke. Kirkland keeps cutting between the spectacle, and Lisa's face, and that's the tell of season 4 at large. The series can laugh at the circus while still sitting with the kid at its centre. All the while, smaller delights crowd the edges. Doris Grau pops up with that unbeatable gravel as the ice cream parlour lady. The writers sneak in Miss Penny Candy, steadying Krusty's jacket like a pro's pro. And Kent Brockman's "Oh, the humanity" over the blimp bit lands with such timing that the commentary remembers the room breaking up when they screened it. The satire sharpens when Lisa inherits the crown by default. Amber's metal sceptre draws a lightning bolt, and discovers the pageant's real purpose is to manufacture a child spokesperson for Laramie cigarettes, which lets the show jab at the long, weird history of cartoon and kid-adjacent tobacco advertising without turning into a lecture. Lisa's response is pure Season 4 spine. She uses her platform to denounce smoking and tweak Mayor Quimby's grift, and the adults scramble to shut her up by hunting for a technicality. The writing room lore is that the joke about Homer writing "OK" in the box marked "Do not write in this space" took forever to crack until Frank Mueller pitched the line that made everyone go, "That's it." When it lands both as a perfectly dumb Homerism and as a smart plot gear that lets Lisa lose the sash but keep the dignity, which was always the emotional target. Homer's real gift wasn't the crown, but the vote of confidence that gets her back on her feet. Jeff Martin sprinkles the path with zingers that feel like they've been sitting on note cards for years waiting for a home. Bart's Betty Grable riff, the chewing gum walk that sends Ralph Wiggum into a dairy pun, and Krusty's ad-lib scenelets that could roll straight onto a VHS of local television horrors. The culture nerd riffs are dense and breezy. The Star Wars and Princess Leia hair beats on the carnival sign. The Hindenburg pose and Brockman's historically perfect tag. The sly Disney lawyering, yet none of it smothers the family story, which is kept warm by a score that swells for the pageant medley as Lisa sings a proudly corny America the Beautiful into Proud Mary, a two-step that tells you exactly who she is. Fiercely earnest with a streak of showbiz mischief. Behind the scenes, you can sense the staff writing slightly ahead of the culture. On commentary, they note that in 1992, child pageant were viewed with a kind of naive kitsch that would turn darker in the years to come. So the episode's tackiness reads now as both satire and accidental prophecy. And because this is season 4, even the throwaway details have craftsmanship. the chalkboard gag, "I will not prescribe medication," and the off-frame couch gag reflect a crew enjoying how meta it can be without getting cute, while sound editorial trims, like dropping a dodgy celebrity imitation rather than forcing it, keep the pace airy. What makes the half-hour sing, though, are the performances threading the needle between affection and bite. Smith's tremble-steady Lisa building herself back up. Dan Castellaneta letting Homer's buffoonery melt into a shy, chest-out pride. And the chorus of Springfield voices, Krusty's hard-working hackery, Brockman's blithe newsreader doom, even the pageant lifers who sound like 40-something smokers in 9-year-old bodies, selling a world where the adults are ridiculous and the kid is, somehow, the calm centre. By the last beat, when Lisa loses the title on a loophole and shrugs with her father about whether he was drunk when he filled in the form, the show has quietly done what it does at its best. Taken a junky American ritual, stripped it for parts, and rebuilt it into a small, funny parable about how love, properly misapplied, can still land you exactly where you need it to go. Treehouse of Horror 3, Season 4, Episode 5 of The Simpsons, originally aired on October 29th, 1992. It opens like a little film studies in joke, as the camera drifts through the cemetery. Then Homer waddles into Alfred Hitchcock's famous silhouette as Charles Gounod's funeral march of a marionette plays, the exact music Hitchcock used to greet viewers with a dry, "good evening." Even the joke is subtle. Homer's belly pushes past the outline. This year's wraparound isn't a treehouse at all, but a full-blown Halloween party at the Simpson house, with the kids of Springfield in costume, Bart dressed as Alex from A Clockwork Orange, Lisa as the Statue of Liberty, each story told by someone different in the family. It's a small behind-the-scenes tweak that let the writers stage 3 distinct tones under one roof. The first tale, Clown Without Pity, was penned by showrunners Al Jean and Mike Rice, who are leaning into a very specific horror lineage. The Twilight Zone's living doll, filtered through mid-80s gremlins. Homer forgets Bart's birthday present and dashes to a cursed curio shop, the House of Evil, which naturally also sells frozen yogurt, Frogurt, and picks up a talking Krusty doll with its switch accidentally set to evil. The shopkeeper's vaudeville-style volley, "That's good, that's bad, that's good, that's bad," was an old comedy chestnut the staff delighted in dusting off, and Carlos Baeza's direction gives Krusty a slasher's silhouette, Herman-style violins, quick knifey cuts, even a Cape Fear visual riff when the doll clings to the underside of Homer's car. The segment's capper, Repairman flips the doll to good, and Krusty becomes a doting servant. Feels exactly like Season 4's sense of humour. The horror premise gets solved with a dumb, perfect consumer electronics joke. You can chart how production swaggered the season just by clocking the credit gags. Awful Al Jean and mirthless Mike Rice turn up in spooky credits, a tradition the crew loved. It's also a wink at how much of the show's personality came from the room's willingness to mock itself before anyone else did. In the margins, you'll also spot the crew's names on gravestones, and the writers couldn't resist needling would-be Simpsons imitators. In the Pet Cemetery, the headstones read Fish Police, Capital Critters, Family Dog. That's not just a cheap shot. It's a confident industry in joke from a show that knew exactly how many animated sitcoms had tried to follow it and fizzled. The middle story, King Homer, is a gorgeously obsessive King Kong homage that the staff decided to do in black and white, period costumes and all. A choice that actually made Al Jean nervous. He worried that holding monochrome for so long might make viewers think their TVs were broken. In the DVD commentary, they laugh about it now, but at the time it felt like a risk. It pays off immediately. Burns and Smithers, as cigar-clutching impresarios, sail to Ape Island and present Marge as bait. The choreography on Broadway, flashbulbs popping, chains rattling, Homer as Kong too winded to climb past the second story, lands as equal parts affectionate pastiche and Springfield dumbness. It's also one of Matt Groening's favourite Treehouse segments, which tracks. It's pure cartoon craft, carried by tone. The black and white photography wasn't just a gag, it's production flexing. Baeza's boards in King Homer are loaded with little bonuses. There's the throwaway classified ad that sneaks in a Rupert Holmes Pina Colada song lyric, the tiki ritual chant slyly mutating into Mosi Tatapu, and the Broadway scene that echoes Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein staging. Nothing breaks the spell. It just feels like a writer's room full of movie brats entertaining themselves while the animation team keeps the tribute intact. The crew even worried about timing, pacing the flashes and crowd shots so the parody read like a 1930s monster movie instead of a modern chase. That blend of reverence and impishness is season 4 to a T. Then Bart takes the mic for Dial Z for Zombies, a segment credited to Sam Simon and John Vitti that plays like the staff's love letter to Romero with a school library twist. Sent back to find a real book, Bart raids the occult section, Dewey Decimal Sight Gag 666, attempts to resurrect the family cat, and instead raises half of Springfield from the dead. The library's shotgun corridor is staged like a straight action beat, right down to Homer's lever action blast, a visual nod the animators knew cinephiles would clock, and it sets up what may be Mike Rice's favourite punchline he ever put in the show. "Dad, you killed the zombie Flanders." He was a zombie? The writers call that one an all-timer, because it's two jokes at once. A perfect horror movie beat and a pure Homer confession. If you freeze frame through the cemetery, you'll see the writing staff amusing themselves with deep-cut references. Buckminster Fuller's grave capped with a geodesic dome, a Where's Waldo sigh, even American workmanship, which promptly collapses. That's the fun of these early Halloween shows. They're dense enough to reward the fans who tape and rewatch, but clear enough for a kid to follow. And because it's a party wraparound, the show gets to lace in party host details like Marge offering nature's candy fruit and getting an ashtray chucked at her for her trouble, while headless zombie Ned wanders in just to goose the room before Bart promises a pants-wetting tale. It's the animators letting Springfield breathe between the homages. There's also the little matter of tone, and Season 4's crew had it down cold. The Krusty Doll's horror is real enough to threaten Homer, but silly enough to be solved by a toggle. King Homer is grand without being precious. The zombie finale gets to be cartoony gory while landing a tiny moral about brains over brawn. Bart and Lisa save the day with a counterspell, while Homer happily mows down the living impaired. The audio team trims within an inch of its life to keep the rhythm lively. If a celebrity imitation doesn't land, they drop it, and you can hear the cut-to-black confidence in how often they let a punchline hang for exactly one beat, then move. Those tiny decisions are the difference between a segment that merely references a classic and one that lives like a classic in its own right. The ratings validated all that craft. Treehouse of Horror 3 pulled a 14.7 Nielsen and was Fox's top show that week. No small feat for a black and white middle act and a finale full of zombie headshots. By then, the annual Halloween anthology had become a tradition the staff could use as a playground. Multiple writers credited: Gene and Rice on the Killer Doll, Jay Kogan and Wallace Wolodarski on the Kong Riff, Simon and Vitti on the Undead Romp, with Baeza stitching it together so it feels like one breath. The couch gag, skeleton versions of the family racing in, telegraphs the whole hour. The same show you love, skinned for spooky season, with just enough extra bones showing. If you're looking for the single line that explains why this one stuck, it's probably that Rice zinger, he was a zombie. It's the writers admitting the joke was always Springfield's moral centre. Even when the genre says aim for the head, the laugh comes from who's holding the gun. And that's why this half hour keeps getting replayed every October. It isn't just parody, it's the city of Springfield putting on costumes and telling stories the way kids do at a party. Scary, sloppy, heartfelt, and funny, in a way that still works when you know exactly what's coming next. Itchy and Scratchy, the movie, Season 4, Episode 6 of The Simpsons, originally aired on November 3rd, 1992. The origin story is pure writer's room symmetry. If Bart's worship of a hyperviolent cartoon is one of the show's great running jokes, what's the single worst punishment Homer could deliver and actually stick to? John Swartzwelder wrote the script, but the seed was pitched earlier by Sam Simon. Bart finally pushes things too far. Homer finally follows through, and The Forbidden Fruit is the most anticipated movie of Bart's life. At the first table read, the structure looked lopsided. Act 1 killed, Act 2 lagged, Act 3 rebounded. So the team tightened the middle until the emotional math clicked. Homer's stubbornness has to feel maddening and, ultimately, loving. And Bart's anguish has to be funny without curdling into cruelty. The last beat locks the thesis: discipline now, dividends later. On screen, the episode clicks because it's a great little family story dressed up as a blockbuster parody. It opens with Star Trek 12, So Very Tired, a gentle roast of aging franchise sequels that primes the pump for the Itchy and Scratchy mania to come. From there, it's all escalation. Prank after prank. A parent-teacher night of dreadful revelations. And then the babysitting fiasco. Bart, zoning out in front of the TV while Maggie toddles into a car, takes an accidental joyride and ploughs into the prison. When Homer tears up Bart's movie ticket and bans him under any circumstances, it's harsh in a way the show rarely lets him be, which is the point. The writers push it further. Homer tells the theatre not to sell Bart a ticket. The film runs for months, wins a shelf of Oscars, and every kid in town sees it 30 times while Bart reads the novelisation and mopes. Only after an 8-month run does the movie leave theatres, with Bart admitting the punishment worked and Homer revealing the long con: someday you'll thank me. 40 years later you do. Old Homer and Chief Justice Bart stroll into a revival screening together, happy as clams. The production is full of sly inside baseball. This was Rich Moore's first episode directing at the new home studio, Film Roman, and you can feel the crew flexing a crisper sense of timing and staging, especially in the documentary inside the episode, where Kent Brockman visits a Korean animation studio to show viewers how American cartoons are made. The gag, animators in sweatshop conditions, landed hard enough that the actual overseas crew in Seoul wasn't thrilled. Rough Draft Korea's Greg Vanzo nearly sent the scene back. In the boards, the team nicknamed their 1929 style Itchy and Scratchy short Steamboat Lawsuit, and you see why. They quote a shot straight out of Disney's Steamboat Willie and somehow skate away, with David Silverman later laughing that he didn't know how they weren't sued. It's the show at its nerviest, loving film history so much it can't resist poking the mouse. And the movie within the episode is a minor legend in the room. The mandate was simple. If you finally show the Itchy and Scratchy movie, it has to top every Itchy and Scratchy cartoon to date. Crazier, bloodier, more baroque, and Swartzwelder obliged by writing what colleagues called the most disturbingly violent sequence they'd ever seen. Cooler heads prevailed. What you see is still outrageous, but the truly gnarly stuff stayed on paper. For film nerds, the episode layers in little candy pieces. The faux vintage Steamboat Itchy, a lobby where someone orders Soylent Green, hold the butter, even a Star Wars style land speeder zipping through the flash forward. When Homer and Bart sit silhouetted in front of the screen like a Mystery Science Theatre 3000 cutout, it's the show explicitly aligning itself with the culture of watching, riffing, and re-watching that made episodes like this stick. There's even a small piece of Simpsons archaeology tucked into the margins. Bumblebee Man makes his first appearance here, a garish, low-rent TV clown inspired by the Mexican character El Chapulín Colorado. He's on screen for seconds, but he's part of what makes Season 4 feel so rich. Springfield is big enough to spawn background oddballs that become fixtures. And in a cute audio deep cut, the episode briefly uses real lunar landing audio for a flashback in which Homer, in perfect character, ignores the moonwalk to listen to bubblegum pop. The voice cast plays it small and true, which is why the satire lands. Dan Castellaneta shades Homer's obstinacy with a tenderness that sneaks up on you. He's not being cruel, he's trying parenting on hard mode. Nancy Cartwright calibrates Bart's arc from smug to shattered to humbled, and Yeardley Smith gives Lisa her perfect role here. The empathetic sibling who sees both sides and still wants the kid to get a break. Around them, Springfield is Springfield. Krusty shilling for the film like a union-scale pitchman. Chief Wiggum useless until the paperwork is done. Lionel Hutt dispensing advice bad enough to qualify as a public menace. Even the throwaway gags feel hand-tooled. Homer's 3 R's, reading TV guide, writing to TV guide, renewing TV guide, the blood spray billboard that splatters a bride a la Carrie, and the Jura Dodge trick so wrong it's probably right. Say you're prejudiced against all races. Outside the story, there's one more killer anecdote. Scheduling. The show usually owned Thursday nights in that era, but Fox got it into their heads that airing this one on Tuesday, alongside the 1992 presidential election returns, would goose the numbers. Instead, it dipped. Still a big hit, just not the monster they expected. While the very next episode, Marge Gets a Job, aired 2 days later in the usual slot and outrated it. If you're writing a book about television hubris, circle that week. For all the sharp elbows, the craft here is loving. The Itchy and Scratchy history of violence, real, folds in a dead-on Steamboat Willie pastiche that the writing staff later cited among their favourite I and S bits of all time. because it captures what the show does best: homage with a switchblade. And the future Flash ending, which could have been a throwaway gag, is framed like a blessing. Homer buys tickets for one senior citizen and one chief justice of the Supreme Court, then sits with his son to finally watch the dumb cartoon they've been fighting over for decades. It's sentimental in the exact right way. The joke lands, the heart lands, and the culture riffs keep humming in the background for the obsessive to freeze frame and grin it. That balance, rowdy parody on the surface, warm family core underneath, is why Season 4's run feels so untouchable, and why this half hour still plays like a tiny classic about how hard it is to be a parent or a kid, or both at once when there's a must-see movie everyone else has already seen. Marge Gets a Job, Season 4, Episode 7 of The Simpsons, originally aired on November 5th, 1992. The episode began with a deceptively small household crisis, one corner of the Simpson home sinking into the earth, and blossomed into a story about pride, work, and the weird, woozy power dynamics at Springfield Nuclear Power Plant. It's the first produced script from writing partners Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein, who'd just joined the staff and were hungry to prove they could do character-driven farce with real heart. Jeff Lynch directed, and you can feel his knack for staging big set pieces: the retirement party, the plant floors, the final Tom Jones caper, while keeping the camera close when it matters. Like on Marge's face the moment she realises she's very good at a job Homer never expected her to want. The high concept spark reportedly came from Conan O'Brien, who pitched the comic friction of Marge joining the plant and Mr. Burns falling helplessly in love with her. Oakley and Weinstein built a story that lets that premise be both deeply silly and uncomfortably plausible. Production-wise, the crew had a surprisingly hard time with something as simple as Marge's lipstick and suit. Lynch and the animators later laughed about how a few early scenes made her look off, not the homemaker we knew, not yet the crisp Office Pro. So there was a pass devoted just to face shapes, lipstick tones, and posture. That's why her transformation plays as a confidence arc, not just a wardrobe change. Meanwhile, the gag-smart world-building came straight from the writer's magpie brains. Troy McClure's foundation repair narration was lifted beat for beat from a Time Life home repair book, so the jargon is absurd and 100% correct. It's one of those Season 4 pleasures, where the joke is funnier because it's true. From the cold open, the episode tees up the satire. Burns forces a beloved lifer, Jack Marley, into retirement just so he can throw himself a party. Held at the Spruce Caboose, an eatery themed around a hubristic, too big train that literally couldn't stay on the tracks. A pointed parody of Howard Hughes's Spruce Goose. On stage, Smithers leads a chorus line through Mr. Burns, a dead-on Citizen Kane nod that flips the There Is a Man number into a hymn for corporate ego. It's a pure film nerd bite done with Springfield tackiness, glitzy legs, Wallesian angles, and a crowd cheering a man who has just fired the guest of honour. The combo, Kane pastiche inside a theme restaurant about a famous boondoggle, quietly tells you everything about Burns without a single new line of dialogue. Once Marge lands at the plant, with a Lisa-polished resume and an office that used to be Smithers's, the A-story is all friction. Burns' infatuation is played as lavish cluelessness, a blizzard of Ivy League compliments and old movie gestures that slide into workplace harassment without him noticing. The episode keeps cutting that grandeur down to size. The surveillance camera sweep scored with a villain theme, the photo ops with historical figures, the sudden gifts that are really power tests, and the show is careful to keep Marge's centre intact. She's proud to be good at her job. She's not flattered by her boss. And when Homer's temper finally flares on her behalf, Burns' bubble pops at once. The writing threads that needle where the laugh lands on Burns, but the sympathy stays with Marge. And where Homer's bluster, for once, reads as instinctive decency rather than lunk-headedness. Around the edges, the B-plot is a compact parable. Bart fakes illnesses to duck an English test, gets sent into the hall to finish it, and promptly meets a very real wolf that's escaped from a Krusty the Clown taping. The fable of the boy who cried wolf played literally. The animators actually drew multiple versions of post-attack Bart and chose the least bruised-looking cut. The idea was to keep the danger cartoony, not traumatic, which is why the sequence hits like a Looney Tune, even as it pays off the storybook moral. On the broadcast side, there was a bigger adjustment later. The original airing included a specific joke about Bart faking Tourette's to avoid a test, which prompted viewer complaints. In subsequent versions, the dialogue around that beat was changed. What you'll hear on later releases is a rabies line, an unusually direct response for a show that typically prefers to answer outrage with new jokes. The other brush with standards and practices is infamous for how ordinary it was meant to be. In Smithers' dream of rescuing his beloved boss with a torch singer swell and a bedroom window breeze, an animation lump that was supposed to be a knee struck censors as an anatomical enthusiasm. Frames were trimmed, shots retimed, and the resulting sequence still plays as the most Smithers thing imaginable, breathless, romantic, and too sincere to disguise. It's a tiny reminder that for all the show's loud jokes, a lot of the envelope pushing in this era happened in little visual implicatures and 2-second trims. Guest star Law gives the episode its joyous kicker. Tom Jones, at that moment a living lounge legend, came in to record with the cast, and by all accounts could not have been more game. He even offered to do a mini-concert once the session wrapped. The script gives Burns the most Burns solution to romance. If a singer is Marge's weakness, then send Smithers to kidnap the man, chain him up in the mansion, and demand a private serenade. And Jones leans into every beat, including the muffled "call the police," as Marge floats away on the applause. It's a punchline that wins, because everyone treats it like an old Hollywood lark, not a felony, which is exactly the jet-lagged morality of the Burns orbit. And then there's Lionel Hutz, who manages to steal his minutes like only Phil Hartman could. Marge turns to him when Burns' courtship curdles. Hutz storms into the office, promises evidence, precedent, and witnesses, and then evaporates at the sight of Burns' 10 silk stocking attorneys, leaving behind a briefcase filled with shredded newspapers. The character's whole ethos is there in one exit. A TV lawyer cutting a TV ad with a TV case file, fleeing a real fight like he's missed his cue. Hartman seasons it with that breezy salesman patter he could summon on command, which keeps the scene from going sour. It's less about legal incompetence than about Springfield's cottage industry of men who are all bluster until the billable hours start. If you're a continuity nerd, you get a buffet, the blackboard gag, "I will not teach others to fly," and the head swap couch gag, which pops twice thanks to Maggie coolly reclaiming her pacifier from Homer. You also get a sly Star Wars sting when Burns surveils the plant like a space tyrant, a Thoreau parody when Homer daydreams about ditching it all, and that crushingly perfect Nixon with Elvis composition when Burns flips through his scrapbook of power. Season 4 is when the show trusts itself to stack references like this, without elbowing you in the ribs. They're texture, not punchlines, unless you're listening for them. Taken as a whole, the half-hour shows off everything that made this stretch of the series so supple. It nails a tonal balance, office romance melodrama that's actually a harassment story, a child fable B-plot that becomes a legit action beat, sitcom comeuppance that resolves not in courtroom fireworks, but in a small human gesture. After Homer's swing and Marge's clear line drawing, Burns backs off with the embarrassed dignity of a man who's forgotten what a boundary is. Smithers gets his desk back, the house gets fixed, and the family ends their night slow dancing while a shackled crooner nails his key change. Beneath the jokes about trains too big for their tracks and bosses too old for the room, it's a story about competence, Marge's, asserting itself until the world makes space. That's why it plays warm, even as it skewers. The episode looks at work the way Marge does, as a thing you do well because you can, and then lets the rest of Springfield tie itself in knots around her until it learns to clap. New Kid on the Block, Season 4, Episode 8 of The Simpsons, originally aired on November 12th, 1992. The making-of story begins on a threshold moment for the writer's room. This is the first produced Simpsons episode written by Conan O'Brien, who'd just joined the staff and was eager to write something that felt both sweet and warped, Bart's first real crush, laced with a classic Springfield legal fiasco. Director Wes Archer took the script and staged it like a small coming-of-age movie stitched to a towny tall tale, so the A story moves with a teenager's pulse, while the B story marches towards a punchline verdict only the Simpsons would call justice. You can feel the team locking into that Season 4 groove, where character beats do the heavy lifting and the gags snap into place around them. The neighbours moving is the hinge. The Winfields, the grumpy retirees next door, finally decamp for Florida. Homer quips they're going to run out the clock, and in move Ruth Powers and her teenage daughter Laura. It's a clever swap from the production side. The Winfields fade out as a background presence, and a new mother-daughter pair arrives with instant story juice. Sarah Gilbert voices Laura with a dry, conspiratorial warmth that makes Bart fall headfirst. Pamela Reed gives Ruth a flinty sincerity that will pay off later when the show pairs her with Marge. Archer's boards let the introduction play like a mini rom-com meet-cute. Laura shakes Bart awake, and boom, the kid is gone. On paper, O'Brien split the hour between Bart's helpless infatuation and Homer's latest encounter with American commerce. The B story is a corker. Homer sees an ad for the Frying Dutchman's all-you-can-eat buffet, eats like a man with a mission, and gets thrown out before he's satisfied, prompting a lawsuit led by Phil Hartman's Lionel Hutz. The courtroom is a Swiss watch of jokes. The overweight jury, Hutz's most blatant case of false advertising since the never-ending story, and a settlement so grotesquely on-brand you just nod and smile. Homer agrees to be displayed at the restaurant as Bottomless Pete, nature's cruelest mistake. It's Springfield jurisprudence at its most efficient. Everybody's slightly worse morally, and much happier comedically. Behind the scenes, that buffet story exists because a different celebrity plan went sideways. The original subplot was a Don Rickles cameo that would spiral into a fight with Homer and a day in court. The staff were sure it would happen, but Rickles didn't like the portrayal and passed. The writers kicked around another alternate, Homer becoming an improbably gifted barber, before landing on the all-you-can-eat case, which the room immediately recognised as the purer Simpsons premise. You can hear the relief in commentary lore. The legal farce lets Hartman feast, gives Hank Azaria's newly minted sea captain a showcase, and dovetails elegantly with the A-Plot's babysitting setup. About that sea captain, this is his debut, and he's a straight shot of O'Brien's sensibility. One part postcard New Englander, one part pirate radio. The character, Captain Horatio McAllister, was created for this episode. Azaria based the voice on Robert Newton's old movie Buccaneers, and the writers gleefully fed him briny nonsense the rest of the series would quote on loop. It's a tidy bit of world building. Introduce a location, the Frying Dutchman, a proprietor with a voice you can hear from across the room, and a grievance absurd enough to yank him into court. By the time Hutz addresses him as Captain McAllister on the stand, he already feels like a Springfield lifer. Meanwhile, the A story is all Bart, and Archer shoots it with visual tenderness that lets the jokes sting less and the heartbreak sting more. Bart tries every kid trick in the book to impress Laura. Gross out bravado, jokey machismo, even the ancient Hertz donut bit. And Gilbert keeps Laura perched right on the line between amused big sister and fledgling teen with her own orbit. When Laura reveals she's dating Jimbo Jones, the crush curdles into a perfect Bart scheme. He prank calls Mose, gives Jimbo's name and Bart's home address, and sits back as Mose storms over with a rusty and dull knife. Watching Jimbo dissolve into tears short-circuits Laura's outlaw fantasy and resets the balance. She tells Bart he's sweet, and that if he were older she'd date him. But the episode wisely leaves him where he started. 10 years old, a little bruised, a little proud. Casting makes the confection work. Gilbert's droll timing underplays Laura's appeal so it feels real to a kid. Reed's Ruth reads as competent and a little weary, exactly the tone the show will exploit beautifully in Marge on the Lam. Hartman, as ever, turns Lionel Hutz into an entire legal system by himself. Silky confidence, catastrophic ethics, and in this case an unlikely win. And Azaria's sea captain arrives fully formed, a walking catchphrase generator with a restaurant that looks like it was built from shipwreck lumber and lawsuits. Production trivia buffs get a few extra candies. This episode introduces both the Powers family and the sea captain, and it effectively writes the Winfields off the street. A quiet neighbourhood retcon the animators' finesse with a moving day gag, and one perfect Homer line about Florida. The chalkboard reads, "I will not bring sheep to class," and the couch gag dumps the family through the floor. Two quick meta beats that bookend an episode otherwise grounded in first crush jitters and small claims lore. Ratings-wise, it did exactly what the network wanted. A 14.4 Nielsen and Fox's top show that week. Not bad for a story that turns on a teenage babysitter and a buffet settlement. There's another little origin tucked inside. New Kid doesn't just debut the sea captain. It codifies the show's love of hyper-specific adult jargon as punchline. The court's faux gravitas pacing, The way Hoots stacks precedent you can almost believe. The Frying Dutchman's shabby grandeur. The writers are doing what they'll do all season, letting detail make the joke sharper. And Archer's blocking keeps the episode nimble. The Dutchman sequences are bright and busy, the babysitting scenes low lit and conspiratorial, so you feel the tonal flip every time we cut between Homer's appetite and Bart's heartbreak. When the credits roll, the episode has snuck in a lot. A new family, a new recurring character, a cleanly told first love story, and one of the series' most quoted Hutz lines. It's also a neat mission statement for O'Brien's brief, beloved run. Big gags hung on a sturdy emotional clothesline, with just enough civic insanity to keep Springfield feeling like a place where every small problem becomes a parade, a trial, or a stunt at a seafood restaurant. If you were Bart's age when it aired, you probably felt the ache. If you were Homer's age, you probably felt the hunger. And if you were already a Simpsons diehard, you could feel the show teaching itself how to do both at once. Mr. Plough, Season 4, Episode 9 of The Simpsons, originally aired on November 19th, 1992. The seed of the story is wonderfully simple. John Vitti wanted a winter episode that wasn't a holiday special, and once he pictured Homer buying a snowplow, the rest fell into place. A get-rich-quick scheme, a late-night local commercial, and the kind of best friends turned rivals plot that let Springfield's sweetness and pettiness collide. It was a hectic moment on the show. Some contracts had lapsed, the staff was thinner than usual, and scenes kept getting added after the animatic. But Vitti was so locked in, he essentially pitched the whole spine himself, then wrote a script that plays like a small-town tall tale with an unexpectedly warm heart. Jim Reardon directed, and you can feel him leaning into sturdy action geography, snowstorms, mountain roads, avalanches, while saving the biggest flourishes for the ads inside the episode. The plot clicks at that point every parent recognises. Homer totals his car driving home in a blizzard, stumbles into an auto show, and, seduced by shiny machines and a friendly financing plan, buys a truck with a plough bolted on the front. Business is slow until Lisa suggests cutting a commercial for local cable, and the result is pure Springfield, a Roto-Rooter-style jingle. Call Mr. Plough, that's my name. That name again is Mr. Plough. That's so catchy it turns the phone into a slot machine. Jeff Martin wrote the lyric. It's a straight send-up of the real jingle. Soon, Homer's clearing driveways, blessed with a key to the city, and basking in that specific kind of small-town fame that makes you walk differently through the grocery store. Enter Barney. Nothing curdles a buddy's pride faster than another buddy's success, so Barney Gumble slaps a Crown logo on his own truck and launches the Plough King, then one-ups Homer with a slicker ad and a star vocalist. That singer is Linda Ronstadt, playing herself no less, who records a mariachi-inflected Plough King jingle, and even a Spanish version, a cheeky nod to her run of Mexican standards albums in real life. She cut her lines up in San Francisco, and the writers still talk about how she lit up the session. Vitti called her Spanish take one of the most beautiful sounds he'd ever heard in a booth. Once that spot hits, the tide turns. Mayor Quimby rescinds Homer's key and hands it to Barney. The phones stop ringing for Mr. Plough. And even Adam West, yes, Adam West, takes his business elsewhere. West's cameo is costume nerd Catnip. Vitti pitched him because he simply wanted to meet his childhood Batman, and the room, full of fellow Bat kids, jumped at it. In the show, he's working a car show autograph table, squinting at a sleek modern Batmobile, and rambling delightfully about how in his day the suit didn't need moulded muscles, then doing the Bertuzzi for anyone within a 10-foot radius. Matt Groening later said West was one of the most universally beloved guests ever to drop by the studio, and the scene plays like a bunch of grateful writers giving a hero 5 minutes to be himself. Because season 4 is a toy chest, the episode layers in a second ad that's as funny for how little it sells as for how lavish it looks. After Barney creams him on late night cable, Homer pays a real agency, McMahon and Tate, a bewitched nod, to produce a glossy Mr. Plough spot modelled on high-fashion perfume ads of the era. Reardon films it like a foreign art trailer. Fast clouds borrowed from Koyaanisqatsi, a snow globe shattering like Citizen Kane, a soaring aria that the team sourced from a Russian recording of Casta Diva because at the time, US and Russian copyright regimes didn't quite line up. It's gorgeous, weird, and utterly useless at telling you what Mr. Plough actually does, which is the joke, and it quietly shows how confident the crew had become at staging mini-movies inside the show. The movie brat riffs pop all over. The terrifying mountain bridge on Widow's Peak tips its hat to William Friedkin's Sorcerer, right down to the music cues. Kent Brockman channeling Walter Cronkite as he solemnly reports Barney's avalanche is a super deep pull the writers giggled over. The opening TV special Carnival of the Stars needles the old Circus of the Stars format, with Troy McClure broadcasting from Molokai, not just for lepers anymore. It's the kind of reference density Season 4 thrives on. There if you want it, invisible if you don't, always tethered to a clean emotional engine. Two dopes hurting each other's feelings until one of them does the right thing. And that's where the story lands. In a petty fit, Homer sends Barney on a wild goose job to a non-existent mountain driveway. When the news breaks that Barney's trapped by an avalanche, Homer drives straight into the storm to haul his friend out. The rescue is staged like a real action beat, plough lights carving snow, a kabuki of crumbling drifts, and then, in perfect Simpsons fashion, the cosmos itself flicks the punchline. The minute Homer boasts, "Not even God himself can stop us," the temperature spikes, the snow melts, and both businesses evaporate. As the repo man tows away the plough, the joke softens into a wink. Homer keeps the Mr. Plough jacket because he knows it makes Marge affectionate. That mix, big set piece, cosmic gag, warm button, is this era's house style. The cast chemistry makes it sing. Dan Castellaneta threads Homer's bull-headed pride and sheepish decency, a balance Emmy voters noticed that season. Hank Azaria's Barney remixes Wounded Ego in barfly bravado. Phil Hartman glides in as Troy McClure to MC the episode's TV within TV absurdities. And the Ronstadt and West cameos feel like the opposite of stunt casting. Each leans into their own persona instead of fighting it. Even the micro gags are immaculately tuned. The couch gag squeezes the whole family onto a single wooden chair. The blackboard reads, "A burp is not an answer." And somewhere in there, Conan O'Brien sneaks in a late writer's room edition, the bit where Homer fiddles a radio dial to rebalance his truck. That's so dumb smart, you can hear the table laugh. If you're the sort who cares about numbers, the audience got it immediately. Mr. Plough pulled a 14.6 Nielsen and was Fox's top show that week. A tidy confirmation that the series could swing from tender family beats to meta-commercial pastiche to live action set-piece parody and keep everyone on board. In the awards pile, Castellaneta picked up his second straight Emmy for voiceover work on the back of this one, and the staff even took a moonshot that year by submitting Season 4 in the main Outstanding Comedy Series category, rather than the animated programme slot. Brassy, maybe premature, but perfectly in tune with the episode's confidence. A few stray bits of production lore complete the picture. Vitti and company first batted around Lenny as Homer's rival before realising Barney gave the feud more heart. The episode's Adam West idea was as much fan service for the writers as for viewers. Vitti admitted he suggested him because he wanted to meet him, which is exactly the kind of honest, kid-at-the-controls impulse that keeps this era sparkling. And while the show rarely flags its own cleverness, the writers later enjoyed pointing out how many very obscure references they squeezed in here. It's a half hour built like a Plough itself, pushing a huge pile of in-jokes forward while clearing a clean path for the story underneath. Lisa's first word, Season 4, Episode 10 of The Simpsons, originally aired on December 3rd, 1992. The writer's room origin is the kind of sweet and sly idea that powered this whole season. Al Jean and Mike Rice wanted Maggie to finally speak, but in a way that still kept her essentially silent. The charming solution, have her say daddy when no one's listening, gave Jeff Martin a North Star, and because he'd already nailed the flashback form on I Married Marge, he took this one too, building a story that's half cosy family lore and half time capsule tour of 1983 to 84. Mark Kirkland directed, and the first choice you feel is tonal. This one's gentle. It's made of soft light and small humiliations, and those sticky details people actually remember from when they were little. Martin's way into the past was wonderfully nerdy. He combed old newspapers and pop ephemera, so the flashbacks world feels oddly specific rather than generically 80s. Homer strolls down the street singing, "Girls just want to have fun." The placards and storefronts wink at Joe Piscopo and Ms. Pac-Man, and the Springfield shopper headline reads, "Mondale to Hart, where's the beef?" Which is exactly the kind of period mashup the show loves, politics refracted through ad copy. Even the Lincoln Savings and Loan gag, Homer parking Lisa's college fund in a nest egg that would soon become an infamous S and L fiasco, lands like a family joke and a history joke at the same time. And then there's the clown bed. The writers joke that The Simpsons is powered by true, tiny humiliations. And this one is straight from the room. Mike Rice's dad actually built a clown face bed that terrified his kids. The way it plays here, Homer, with all the right intentions and none of the craftsmanship, constructing a nightmare for Bart, has that perfect home movie vibe, ridiculous and somehow completely believable. The line Bart mutters as he curls into a ball on the rug, "Can't sleep, clown'll eat me," became a catchphrase for a reason. It's the show encoding a childhood fear in 6 words and a trembling delivery. Kirkland's staging finds grace notes everywhere. Watch how the camera glides through the cramped starter apartment, then expands into wider frames as the family moves to 742 Evergreen Terrace, the house that will define the series. Flanders appears at just the right neighbourly distance, ready with a loner TV tray and passive-aggressive cheer. Kirkland treats him as a new piece of furniture in the show's living room rather than a punchline. Little Lisa, all gummy smiles and bright eyes, is animated to be exactly as cute as everyone thinks she is, which lets the episode keep the emotions soft, even when Bart's jealousy spikes. Because this is season 4, the cultural riffing doubles as plot. Krusty Burger's 1984 Olympics scratch-off promo, rigged so the hard communist events will keep the prizes cheap, detonates when a messenger storms in with the real-world twist. The Soviets are boycotting Los Angeles. Suddenly, Team USA wins everything, and Krusty's giving away free burgers until the tills bleed. It's a great joke on its own. It's also a pointed parody of McDonald's ill-fated 1984 giveaway, which really did flood franchises with free food when the medal count went nuts. The episode collapses corporate hubris, Cold War politics, and a clown's exasperation into one clean runner, and it gives the flashback a kind of civic hum. Springfield's always connected to the wider, dumber world. The beats between Bart and Lisa are written like sibling field notes. Bart's too, feral and territorial. Lisa arrives and vacuum seals the oxygen in every room. He tries sabotage, then displacement, then escape. Nothing works. And then, this is the heart of it, she speaks. Not Mama, not Dada, but Bart. In one word, the writers pull the plug on jealousy and switch on protectiveness. The episode's thesis is right there. Families are ridiculous and exhausting, and sometimes a single tiny gesture rearranges everyone's molecules. Martin structures it so the payoff bounces twice. First in the flashback, when Bart realises he's important to Lisa, then at the end, when Maggie quietly returns the favour to Homer. That last beat is the episode's secret engine. Getting Elizabeth Taylor to voice Maggie's daddy was the kind of stunt casting the show rarely indulged unless it served the joke, and here it absolutely does. The lore around the session has been told a dozen ways. The producers asked for multiple takes to make the line sound more babyish. Matt Groening once joked on TV that the early reads came out too sexy. Years later, Al Jean clarified that Taylor's salty F-U was a playful button in Maggie's voice, not a storm out. What matters is the result. One breath of sound that lands like a kettlebell. Homer tucks Maggie in and hopes she never talks back. The door clicks. Daddy. The room always knew they had something special there. The other production fingerprints are delightfully practical. The first cut ran a little short, so they added an extended couch gag. The family join a Busby Berkeley-style kick line of circus performers to bring it to time, which is the most Simpsons-y solution imaginable. Solve a math problem with a joke. Standards and practices pinged a line where Homer tells Marge that jealous toddler Bart can kiss my hairy yellow butt. Course, they said, for a 2-year-old's flashback. So the team massaged timing and emphasis rather than losing the rhythm of a marital back and forth. And because the episode lives in babyland, the animators had to invent toddler grammar for a bunch of adults. The board artists spent real energy figuring out how a 2-year-old Bart mugs and sulks without turning into a different character. You don't notice any of that when you watch it. You just feel the ease. If you want a snapshot of why Season 4 felt like such a levelling up, the jokes inside the jokes are a good place to look. There's an itchy and scratchy shortcut to Chariots of Fire. Hibbert name checks Mary Lou Retton while the Krusty promo implodes. Background kids float through the frame like the dead-end kids crossed with a daycare. None of it yanks the story off its rails. It all just builds that Springfield atmosphere, where reference and reality bump shoulders without drawing attention to themselves. The episode also landed like a brick in the ratings. 16.6 Nielsen, Fox's top show that week. And critics singled out the last 30 seconds for being, against all odds, a heart melter. It's funny, because the craft there is almost invisible. There's no score swell, no lecturing moral, just a simple staging choice. We see Maggie speak. No one else does. It lets the show have it both ways, canonically Silent Baby, emotionally satisfying secret, and it's that kind of elegant dodge that made this run so durable. The sentiment sneaks up on you, and then sits beside the clown bed, the Krusty meltdown, the "Where's the beef?" headline, like it was always part of the same family scrapbook. Maybe that's why Lisa's first word still feels fresh. It isn't a big myth episode. It's a porch light of a half hour. You get the origin of the house, a little neighbourhood lore, a superhero level cameo compressed to one syllable, and a reminder of what the show does when it's not being loud. It watches a family be a family. Bart's first, Lisa's first, Maggie's first. The series has done wilder things, sharper things, meaner things. But if you're putting together an audiobook of Springfield folk tales, this is one you tell with a smile in your voice because it knows the trick. The smallest words hit the deepest. Homer's Triple Bypass, Season 4, Episode 11 of The Simpsons. Originally aired on December 17th, 1992. The seed for this one wasn't a jokey premise at all. It was a dare. James L. Brooks pitched the room on tackling a story where Homer genuinely faces death. And the staff, already stretched thin between seasons, brought in two freelancers, Gary Apple and Michael Carrington, to crack it. That outsider angle helped them cleave straight to the human stuff. What if you put the most indestructible man on TV on a hospital gurney and still make it funny without being glib? The answer became a clean, emotional arc with Homer's heart giving out at the plant, money problems closing in, and the family taking a flyer on the only surgeon they can afford, Dr. Nick Riviera. Because the topic was heavy, the production leaned hard on David Silverman to keep the tone buoyant without sanding off the stakes. Silverman, who had a knack for expressive, physical storytelling, treated Homer's medical crisis as a cartoon and a real scare at once. He animated the first heart attack with big squash and stretch grimaces to earn laughs, then added tiny touches that ground the fear, like Homer's out-of-body drift, where one foot still touches his real body, a gentle visual cue that he's not gone. A medical consultant quietly sanity checked the operating room beats, so the satire never tipped into parody mush. You can feel how the episode was engineered, scene by scene, to balance that weight. The cold open is a full mini-show. A COPS parody, Bad Cops, that careens around Springfield before crash-cutting to Homer snarfing turkey in bed. It wasn't even in the original animatic. They added it late because the episode ran short. And it turns out to be a perfect throat clearer. A raucous palate cleanser before the story proper kicks in. Once the plot gets moving, it's pure Season 4 economy. Mr. Burns fires Homer, and click, Homer's heart gives out. The gag density never lets the fear calcify. Krusty swings by with a bleak little confession about his own overtaxed ticker and barks. This ain't makeup. A line the creators still single out as a favourite because it's both grotesque and weirdly sweet. Even clowns can break. The blackboard gag, coffee is not for kids, and the giant couch gag are the show's way of saying, yes, we know how serious this is. We're still us. Behind the scenes, the script was a bit of a relay. Apple and Carrington wanted a hospital bed visit where Bart and Lisa say goodbye without actually saying goodbye, but they couldn't find the shape. Brooks famously talked it through and essentially performed a moment for them, a micro scene about kids being brave because it's what Dad needs, not what they feel. At another fork, the team originally pegged Dr. Hibbert to perform the bypass. Switching to Dr. Nick unlocked a different kind of comedy entirely. The cheerful incompetence that only lands because everyone around him is taking the situation seriously. Dr. Nick's showcase is a symphony of cheap TV and borrowed confidence. The night before surgery, he studies an instructional tape that's been recorded over by a talk show called People Who Look Like Things. By morning, he's in the theatre with nothing but a scalpel, a smile, and Lisa Simpson in the gallery. Lisa's been reading about cardiology, of course, and her whispered prompts, cut below the blockage, turn Dr. Nick into a passable conduit for competence. It's one of the show's loveliest jokes about Springfield's social contract. Sometimes the adult learns from the child, and the child is fine with that. Silverman salts the hour with tiny autumn moves that reward a freeze frame. When Homer drives to work, he chugs behind a flatbed carrying Edgar Allan Poe's birthplace, then hears a telltale heartbeat and panics. A Poe gag inside a cardiology story, planted by Silverman because he could. When Homer tries to cheer the kids with a sock puppet show, the puppets are Akbar and Jeff from Matt Groening's Life in Hell cartoons. A private nod folded inside family drama. And the sleep-deprived dream language is precise. Lisa imagines heaven as cloud goes up, cloud goes down, the same rhythm as Homer's motorized hospital bed, grim reality echoing in a kid's fantasy. The episode is dotted with production trims and swaps you'd never notice unless someone told you. The writers first planned to end with a dark little button. Homer, post-op, cheerfully eating pizza in his hospital bed, echoing a flashback of baby Homer gnawing on a slice. They swapped it for the family's ICU visit because the original read as blithe about the behaviour that landed him on the table. And that COPS opener? It pulls double duty as time filler and a dress gag. The cops ask if they've busted 742 Evergreen Terrace, one of those early season continuity slips that fan archivists later flagged with a grin. Even the one-liners carry lore. Dr. Nick's greeting is its own Greek chorus. Hi everybody! But the line people still bring up from this one is his reunion with an angry former patient. Well, if it isn't my old friend Mr. McGregor, with a leg for an arm and an arm for a leg. It's the character in a nutshell, chipper, oblivious, and somehow still the guy you're trusting with a bypass. The cloud goes up, cloud goes down. Refrain became a minor touchstone too. Guides and retrospectives cite it as the perfect example of how this half hour milks a laugh from a nervous system that's already primed to worry. From the writing side, there's a very Simpsons solution to a very TV problem. The show needed to get from terror to tenderness without a lecture, and so it leaned on the ensemble. Apu, Lovejoy, Krusty. Every corner of Springfield brushes up against Homer's crisis, not to deliver a sermon, but to be themselves in a way that adds pressure or relief. Lisa's quiet competence and Marge's steadying presence do more than any doctor's monologue ever could. And in the middle of it, the series lets Homer be both frightened and vain, cracking jokes about the hippopotamus oath as his heart literally sputters. The rhythm keeps you laughing 1 second before the lump in your throat arrives. If you're looking for fingerprints from the people who made it, they're there too. Apple has since told the story of moving to LA, loving the show, and suddenly finding himself writing a classic in the middle of its golden run. Carrington would become a recurring voice in later seasons. On commentary tracks and in interviews, Silverman talks about going all out to stage Homer's pain so it reads as slapstick and stress. You can hear the same pride years later when he drops by a Simpsons podcast to revisit the choices. The finished episode feels deceptively simple because a lot of hard, fussy work made it so. And audiences got it. In a week crammed with December heavies, the episode pulled a 14.3 Nielsen and ranked as Fox's top show, proof that the series could take a premise that would make most comedies flinch and turn it into something that's both howlingly funny and genuinely warm. By the tag, when Homer's repaired heart thumps the Simpsons theme for a bar or two, you've watched the trick happen in real time. A man almost dies. A bargain doctor saves him. His family carries him the rest of the way. And the show, which began the season by gleefully immolating a summer camp, quietly reminds you what it thinks love is. A cloud goes up, a bed goes down, and somehow the laugh and the relief land at exactly the same moment. Marge versus the Monorail, Season 4, Episode 12 of The Simpsons, originally aired on January 14th, 1993. The episode begins with a joke that tells you the show is about to swing for the fences. Homer humming the Flintstones theme as he drives straight into a tree. And behind it is a writer itching to try something nuts. Conan O'Brien had seen a mysterious Los Angeles billboard that simply read Monorail and couldn't stop laughing at the absurd confidence of that single word. He walked into the room pitching a fast-talking huckster who sells Springfield a gleaming solution to a problem it doesn't have, part small-town musical, part disaster movie. Al Jean and Mike Rice thought it sounded a little crazy, but James L. Brooks loved it. And once that gong in the writer's room metaphorically rang, the staff leaned into making a full-on Harold Hill pastiche that still felt like The Simpsons. Conan's favourite musical is The Music Man, and you can hear it immediately in Lyle Lanley's patter and the town meeting showstopper. The Monorail song is built on that infectious "You Got Trouble" rhythm. A salesman conjures a threat, then sells the cure before anyone can ask a cogent follow-up. The joke's precision is what makes it sing. It isn't just a parody, it's a character reveal. Lanley wins Springfield in 6 verses flat because Springfield wants to be won. Alf Clausen's orchestration gives it Broadway gloss, while the lyrics, credited to O'Brien with Al Jean's assist, pack civic flim-flam and Springfield in-jokes into a tune you can't stop humming. When the whole town joins the chorus, you're watching a writer's room dare themselves to stage a musical number inside a sitcom, and the animators say, "Yeah, we can top that." Casting seals the con. Phil Hartman was born to play Lanley. He could charm a room and then sell it back to you, and his vocal glide from genial to oily is the engine of the first act. The other masterstroke was the celebrity on the platform, Leonard Nimoy, beaming with dry benevolence as Springfield's ribbon-cutting VIP. He wasn't the first ask. The team tried George Takei, who loved the show but declined because, as a public transit board member, he didn't want to mock mass transit. Nimoy said yes, and then happily sent himself up from "The Cosmic Ballet Goes On" to that final "Didn't I" exit. It's the kind of cameo that makes the whole town look a little more real and a little more ridiculous at the same time. Rich Moore directed and called it one of the most huge and ambitious productions of the year. The episode sprawls across new locations: Lanley's Training Institute, North Heatherbrook's sunburnt ruin, a runway, an entire elevated track. So Moore did something cheeky and practical. He took a camera around Los Angeles, grabbed shots of Old Town Pasadena and North Hollywood, and fed them straight to background layout so Springfield could wear a bigger city's clothes. David Silverman backed him up with dynamic action poses and effects, speed lines, spinning wheels, panicky crowd beats, so that when the monorail finally shudders into motion, you feel the town's stomach drop. From the first table read, you could see the two-act math. Act 1 sells the song. Act 2 sells the consequences. The plot spine is beautifully clean. Mr. Burns gets dinged $3 million for dumping nuclear waste in the park. Marge wants to fix Main Street. Lanley swings in, sings, pockets the cash, trains a conductor, Homer randomly of course, and bolts for Tahiti. Marge is the lone holdout, so she does the legwork, drives to North Haverbrook, meets Sebastian Cobb, and returns with the truth just as the ribbon snaps and Springfield takes its maiden and possibly final voyage. In that thin slice between satire and sincerity, the show keeps the character music playing. Marge is the only adult in the room. Homer is the lovable incompetent who somehow becomes the town's last hope. And the town itself is a chorus. Conan salted the hour with little Springfield folk tales that became instant canon. When Marge inspects the cab and finds a family of possums nesting in the space where the fire extinguisher should be, Homer's response, I call the big one Bitey, lands like a postcard from the show's ID, civic grandeur, meet vermin. When everything begins to fail, the solution is gloriously stupid and perfectly heroic. Find an anchor. Homer pries the M plate off the train, ties it to a rope, and snags the Lard Lad donut to haul the monorail to a stop. The beat feels handmade, the way a kid would imagine saving a whole town. And then Nimoy's final wink blows away any leftover pretension. My work here is done. Didn't you do nothing? Didn't I? Beam. Gone. The cultural references tick by at season 4 speed. Burns is wheeled into court in Silence of the Lamb's restraints. Smithers sneaks toxic waste to the Axel F groove. Homer's conductor uniform nods toward Star Wars dress whites. A Hindenburg photo photobombs a cheery newsstand hit, and the opener's Flintstones riff is a full circle TV animation tip of the cap. None of it slows the story. It's all punctuation. By the time the episode lands its last 3 beats, the monorail was the last folly Springfield ever embarked upon, except for the popsicle stick skyscraper, the 50-foot magnifying glass, and the escalator to nowhere. You have watched a miniature history of American boondoggles sung and staged at cartoon speed. There's good shop talk tucked in the corners too. The song wasn't just a room favourite, it became a live staple years later when O'Brien performed it at the Hollywood Bowl alongside Hank Azaria. And in the booth, Hartman reportedly found Lanley instantly. The glad-handing salesman voice he'd been doing as an office bit became the episode's poppy seed. Those choices are why lines like "I've sold monorails to Brockway, Ogdenville, and North Haverbrook" still get shouted back at the screen. The cadence is musical, the joke is civic, and the voice is a glove. The North Haverbrook detour is where the tone locks. The board artists wash the town in bleached light and yawning negatives. Storefronts sag. A broken track cuts the horizon like a scar. Sebastian Cobb, a brilliant design who looks cross-hatched out of a WPA poster, walks Marge through the aftermath of a previous Lanley pitch. And suddenly, the satire is wearing work boots. It's not anti-transit so much as pro-due diligence. The joke is on Springfield because Springfield skips the reading and sprints to the ribbon. That's why Takei's refusal, because of his real-life transit role, only made the final cameo land cleaner. Nimoy arrives as a different flavour of bemused civic mascot. And the monorail still speeds toward disaster. On paper, the third act is a straight Irwin Allen pastiche, celebrity guest, doomed vehicle, improvised fix. But the episode keeps it featherlight. Homer and Bart scrambling in the cab isn't just slapstick, it's family slapstick. Marge and Cobb radioing advice becomes a marriage comedy beat, and the passengers' panic gets punctured by town-specific silliness. Mayor Quimby crossing his streams of pop culture. Lurleen Lumpkin popping up to announce she slept in a ditch. When the train finally grinds to a halt, the town doesn't learn a lesson so much as shrug in relief. The consequences live in the rubble, and the joke is that everyone moves on. Viewers got the joke in real time. The broadcast pulled a 13.7 Nielsen and was Fox's highest rated show that week. A tidy confirmation that America was happy to watch a con man sing a city into trouble. In the decades since, the half hour has been stamped as a classic again and again, routinely topping best of lists and serving as shorthand for the show's golden era mix of audacity and heart. The reason it lasts is simple. It's an argument for skepticism disguised as a show tune, a cartoon civic lesson staged with a con artist's grin, and a family story that ends with a dad who uses a giant donut to save his kid. If you're building a Mount Springfield, you put the monorail right on the front, because you can still hear the chorus when the credits roll. Selma's Choice, Season 4, Episode 13 of The Simpsons. Originally aired on January 21st, 1993. The story's spark is Selma's, Marge's chainsmoker sister, watching her late Aunt Gladys's videotaped will and being told not to die alone. Out of that comes a neat emotional dare. Can a woman who has perfected independence picture motherhood even for a day? Writer David M. Stern built the episode around that question and then sent Selma into the wild with the best and worst test kids imaginable, Bart and Lisa. Carlos Baeza directed under Al Jean and Mike Rice's showrunning, and you can feel a confident Season 4 rhythm, crisp premise, clean A to B plotting, and jokes that keep the melancholy buoyant. The opening is an all-timer of tonal whiplash. Homer promises the kids a trip to Duff Gardens. Then the news hits, Great Aunt Gladys has died, and the family is off to the funeral instead. In the car, the ding-dong, the witch is dead bit manages to make grief, tastelessness, and childlike coping collide in one sunny burst of wrongness. At the service, Gladys appears by videotape, a morbid pep talk that lands squarely on Selma. It also lands squarely on Julie Kavner, who quietly pulls a production flex here. She voices Marge, Patty, Selma, Jacqueline Bouvier, and Gladys herself in the will scene. 5 distinct timbres layered into a single family tableau, The B-story shove comes from Homer's stomach, as usual. He gets food poisoning from a long-expired hoagie and is grounded just as the kids' dream day arrives. Marge deputises Selma to take Bart and Lisa to Duff Gardens. A perfect sitcom contrivance, because it turns Do I Want a Kid into Can I shepherd two of them through corporate fun without losing my mind? The script keeps it grounded in small-scale logistics. Tickets, lines, the bone-deep fatigue of being responsible for other people's joy. Duff Gardens itself is a sly satire of beer brand theme parks, think Busch Gardens, filtered through Springfield's talent for tackiness. The park's wholesome Hooray for Everything troupe belts a sanitised Walk on the Wild Side, a joke that's somehow both family-friendly and shocking if you know the original lyric. Around every corner, the seven Duffs loom like second-tier mascots. Only a few of their names are spoken on screen this time: Tipsy, Queasy, Surly, and Remorseful. But the visual gag lands anyway. Imagine Snow White's dwarfs rewritten by a brewery's marketing department. The episode's most quoted beat belongs to Lisa. Worn down by the day and dared by Bart, she drinks from the ride's very questionable water in the park's small world-style attraction and begins to hallucinate, climbing to the top of the float to declare, "I am the Lizard Queen." It's staged like a miniature opera, swaying animatronics, kaleidoscope lighting, a tiny goddess of chaos crowning herself while Selma's day dissolves into pure crisis. Park security eventually corrals the kids and their aunt. The test drive of motherhood ends, appropriately, in a security office, paperwork, and all. Behind the scenes, Selma's choice gave the animators some fussy challenges. Season 4 had a lingering issue with eye sizes. In this one, the pupils are noticeably larger, a choice the crew later called out as a mid-season quirk they were still dialing in. Baeza's boards lean into the park's candy-coloured chaos, but the staging is careful. You always know where Bart and Lisa are in relation to Selma, because the joke depends on feeling her responsibility in your bones. The show also sneaks in one of its better pop culture collages. Aunt Gladys opens her will by reciting a slice of Robert Frost. Hooray for Everything is a pitch-perfect Up With People parody, and the Duff Gardens travelogue winks at corporate optimism from the World's Fair era, with a cheerful menace only a place called Little Land of Duff could muster. It's Springfield's genius, a city that can sell you sunshine and hand you a poncho in the same breath. On the voice cast side, Phil Hartman is a Swiss Army knife. He pops up as Troy McClure, as a silky Duff Gardens promo voice, even as security personnel barking procedure, tiny roles that add up to a vibe. The park is run by cheerful pros who can't control anything that matters. Hartman's ability to toggle between razzle-dazzle and bureaucracy makes the satire purr. The episode's best inside joke pet also debuts here. Selma comes home from the funeral not with a child, but with an inheritance: Aunt Gladys's iguana. He's christened Jub Jub, a nonsense name that, according to the staff's own lore, sprang from a random Conan O'Brien utterance in the writer's room, and stuck because it sounded exactly like something Patty or Selma would coo to a reptile. It's the kind of nonsense that becomes canon in one line, and in a neat literary echo, it happens to rhyme with Lewis Carroll's Jub Jub Bird. Stern salts the hour with real-world oddities that make Springfield feel lived in. The potato chip collection in the will, a parade of spuds shaped like presidents and silhouettes. was lifted from a Tonight Show curiosity. A woman named Myrtle Young, who became famous for cataloguing chips that looked like faces. On paper, it's absurd. On screen, it's family lore, sort of petty history that becomes legend at holiday tables. You can feel the writer's delight at finding a joke that's both documentary and deranged. Even the broadcast ephemera hums. The chalkboard gag, "I will not yell she's dead" during roll call, wraps the funeral's black comedy around Bart's school life, and the couch gag drops the family into a net, a tidy metaphor for the way this story traps Selma in responsibilities that aren't hers but might be. Season 4 loved these bookends. They nudged the theme without ever announcing it. What lingers is how cleanly the episode refuses an easy answer. Selma tries on motherhood for a day and finds the fit off. The Duff Gardens Odyssey is exhausting rather than transcendent. Lisa's meltdown is terrifying. Bart ends up in trouble. And when Selma returns the kids, she doesn't need a speech, just a look at Homer, who, for all his chaos, does this every day. The solution she lands on is honest and a little bittersweet. She doesn't need a baby to have companionship or a family. She'll take Jub Jub, thanks, and keep her life the way it is, with room for odd rituals, sister nights, and the occasional loner of the Simpson children. It's a remarkably adult ending for a show that just put a little girl on a hallucinatory float. Proof that Season 4 could shovel Zany by the truckload and still land on a perfectly human grace note. And tucked in the margins are the production fingerprints you only catch on rewatch. Kavner doing an entire family tree by herself. Baeza juggling crowds and ride mechanics. A soundtrack that can slide from funeral dirge to park jingle without breaking stride. If you're mapping the season's range, movie pastiche one week, civic boondoggle musical the next, Selma's Choice is the episode that proves the show can take a small private itch, should I have a kid, and scratch it in public at an amusement park with a lizard waiting patiently at home. That's Springfield in a sentence. Loud, bright, slightly sticky, and, when the rides stop, surprisingly wise. Brother from the Same Planet, Season 4, Episode 14 of The Simpsons, originally aired on February 4th, 1993. The story starts with a very real kind of kid heartbreak. Bart is left standing in a cold rain because Homer forgets to pick him up from soccer practice. That one lapse fuels everything. Resentment curdles into rebellion, and Bart signs himself up with the Bigger Brothers agency, a thinly veiled Big Brothers parody, where he's matched with Tom, a motorcycle-riding super mentor who seems to have leapt out of a recruiting poster. John Vitti wrote it, Jeffrey Lynch directed, and you can feel the room loving the clean A-B structure. Bart shops for a better dad, while Homer, wounded, tries to become a better dad by grabbing his own little brother, Peppy. The production backdrop is pure Season 4 confidence, tight plotting and 1,000 jokes orbiting one simple emotional engine. Even the opening gags set the tone. The chalkboard reads, "The principal's toupee is not a frisbee," and the couch gag spins the living room wall to swallow the family, a visual reset before the episode leans into character. Casting gives the premise its extra shine. The writers actually built Tom for a very specific guest, Tom Cruise. When Cruise passed, Phil Hartman stepped in and did what Hartman always did, turn a role into a charm offensive you still remember years later. He plays Tom as the platonic ideal of a bigger brother, patient, cool, wildly competent, but never smug. The Top Gunnish flourishes. From the F-14 hero talk to the overall jet ace aura are baked in as winks at the part that might have been. And Hartman doubles as Mr. Muntz, Nelson's dad, for a tiny extra slice of Springfield texture. On the other side of the story, Peppy, Homer's little brother in Retaliation, is voiced by Tress MacNeille, who gives the kids wide-eyed sweetness just enough grit that his hero worship of Homer plays as touching rather than treacly. Around that, the B-plot hums with a perfect bit of early 90s ephemera. Lisa gets addicted to the Corey hotline, a 1-900 line voiced by a composite teen idol that knowingly riffs on the era of the two Coreys. Her phone bill, $378.53, becomes its own household crisis, and the audio joke is a classic. Hi, you've reached the Corey hotline, $4.95 a minute. Here are some words that rhyme with Corey: glory, story, allegory, Montessori. It's an exquisitely small satire, and it lands because those hotlines were very real, very goofy, and very expensive. The A-plot may run on fathers and sons, but Lisa's little fall from grace gives the episode the texture of a week in a noisy American house, where one kid's rebellion and another kid's secret both show up on the same pile of bills. Vitti and Lynch salt the hour with film nerd riffs that are never just references, they're story beats. Homer's paranoid confrontation with Bart plays like a living room send-up of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, all shadow and theatrical accusation, and the big third act brawl between Homer and Tom takes its rhythm from John Ford's The Quiet Man right down to the roving geography and the wait that fight's still going punch of it. You can feel the production committing to the set piece. The fight barrels from Marine World, where Homer throws starfish like ninja weapons, and a shark politely provides the rim shot, to downtown Springfield, past the gorge, to an antique shop, and back again, with news bulletins breathlessly confirming that one of the combatants sure looks like Homer Simpson. It's broad, it's physical, and it's anchored by a tiny character truth. A kid wanting two men to stop fighting over who gets to be his father, and instead act like one. The TV within TV beats are equally deliberate. Bart gets seduced by the Bigger Brothers ad during Tuesday Night Live, a withering Saturday Night Live parody that lets Krusty bomb through a monologue and then admit the last half hour's a real garbage dump. Lisa's psychic pick-up Bart, Plough, turns Milhouse into a human Ouija board scrawling Trab-Pew Kicksip on the wall, an eerie shining wink, and the cold open sprinkles in a flying nun sight gag just because this crew can't resist a good broadcast era joke. Even the Ren and Stimpy cameo is handled with care. Gracie Films actually secured permission from Nickelodeon and even pulled in games animation stalwarts like Chris Riccardi to handle layouts, which is why those 15 seconds look exactly right instead of Simpsons doing Ren and Stimpy. These aren't cutaways for their own sake. They're how the episode keeps its cultural weather system buzzing while Bart and Homer work through the storm. What really sells the episode, though, is how specific it is about kid logic. Bart doesn't join the program to be cruel. He's hurt and he wants to be seen. Tom doesn't try to steal a son. He's doing the job the agency asked of him, and he's good at it. Homer's pride flips to panic the instant he realises what he's done, which is why his revenge, signing up to mentor Peppy, is funny and human at once. Peppy's hero worship works like a mirror, Listening to himself brag on Bart to a little boy who believes everything, Homer hears what he's been taking for granted. Lynch stages those peppy scenes quietly. Ice cream dates, stargazing, so that when the big brawl finally happens, you can feel what's at stake under the slapstick. The punchline is simple and right. The matches swap. The kid and the dad go home together. And the people who are trying to fill a hole in their lives find a softer landing than they expected. And then there are the tiny, perfect Springfield touches. At school, Martin mistakes Tom for a suddenly improved Bart's dad, because of course he does. Skinner's grotesquely intimate aside about his mother turned psycho into administrative policy. Marine World's slogan, "No longer educational," is the sort of sign the show loves to hang and then never comment on. The blackboard gag about Skinner's toupee is a one-off window into an abandoned runner the staff briefly toyed with. The couch gag with the spinning wall is pure Saturday matinee mischief. Even the Corey fixation gets buttoned with a tidy behaviour mod twist Marge would approve of. Can Lisa white-knuckle it to midnight without calling? When she does, the victory is small and real, which is this episode in a nutshell. Behind the scenes, the lore is satisfyingly concrete. The production number is 9F12. The writer's Top Gun nods are baked into Tom from the first beat. And the brawl's sound and staging got extra love because the staff wanted it to feel like a proper movie punch-up, not just flailing. The team also had fun threading in contemporary detritus. A record club gripe, a Bobby Sherman crush for young Marge, even a little Ren and Stimpy tussle that had to be toned down because Nickelodeon didn't want its characters acting too savage. It's all one texture. Early 90s TV, rummaged and recomposed into a family story where the gags are dense. But the thesis is simple. Kids forgive faster when grown-ups show up. By the time Bart and Homer are back on the couch running the play-by-play of that ridiculous fight, could you teach me how to do that? Hey. Yeah. The show has reset itself the only way that matters, with two people who belong together exactly where they should be. I Love Lisa, Season 4, Episode 15 of The Simpsons, originally aired on February 11th, 1993. The kernel of the story is as simple and as devastating as a second grader's Valentine's Day. Lisa looks over at Ralph Wiggum's empty mailbox and out of kindness slips him a pity card with a smiling train that says, "I choose you." In the writer's room, that image had a very specific spark. One of the show's senior writers remembered getting a real card with that exact pun as a kid. The kind of talisman that sticks in your head for decades and then suddenly becomes the emotional engine of an episode. Frank Muller took that spark and built a script that's half cringe comedy, half miniature heartbreaker. Wes Archer directed it with a soft focus on the small humiliations that make elementary school feel like combat. Production-wise, it's a clean staff showcase. Muller's script gives Lisa and Ralph both honest motives. She doesn't want him to feel left out. He mistakes kindness for romance. And Archer stages the misunderstandings like tiny farces that escalate one door at a time. The chalkboard gag, "I will not call the principal Spud Head," and the full living room kick line for the couch gag set a playful frame before the episode leans into tender territory, and the air date landed perfectly in real time. A Valentine's Week broadcast for a Valentine's story. Even the production code, 9F13, marks its spot in the show's mid-season hot streak. What people remember first, of course, is Ralph. Up to this point, he'd mostly been an interchangeable Springfield kid. Here, he becomes Chief Wiggum's sweet, odd, painfully earnest son, and the show lets him be genuinely funny without turning him into a punchline factory. The minute Lisa's card lands, he imprints like a baby duck. He carries her books, he stammers out a date invitation, and, thanks to a little police pull, he shows up beside her at a TV taping. When Lisa finally blurts on camera that they're not together and that she never liked him, the knife twist is iconic enough that Bart famously plays the tape in slow motion to pinpoint the exact moment Ralph's heart rips in half. It's squirm funny and sad at once, which is this season's favourite gear. The episode's secret structural trick is how it braids Valentine's Day into President's Day. Springfield Elementary's pageant is a delirious parade of civic corniness. We are the mediocre presidents. You won't find our faces on dollars or on cents. Written and orchestrated with the same care the show gives to its biggest musical swings. The song credits even mirror the episode's credits. Lyrics by Jeff Martin and Frank Muller. Music by Alf Clausen and Martin, which is why it sticks in your head like a real school tune you had to learn. Underneath the jokes about Harrison's 30-day presidency and a chorus of caretaker commanders-in-chief is the actual plot pivot. Lisa, cast as Martha Washington, gets stuck playing opposite Ralph's George, and the boy who just had his heart shattered has to go out and play the father of the country with the girl who turned him down. Archer and the animation crew stage the pageant like a small miracle of timing. The backstage apologies that don't land, the clumsy wigs and rickety sets, the Terminator era Hasta la Vista, Abby, from Bart as John Wilkes Booth. It's all the kind of kids' theatre specificity that makes adults laugh in recognition. And children laugh because, well, it looks like the plays they're actually in. Then Ralph surprises everyone. He turns his pain into a credible, emotional George Washington speech. The crowd rises, and the episode flips its thesis. Even little kids can salvage dignity in public. Lisa, who wanted to do the right thing from the start, gets to do it again, this time with a card that says, "Let's be friends," the gentlest possible reset. Around the edges, the TV within TV beats carry their own lore. The pair end up at Krusty's 29th anniversary special, where the show sprinkles in the kind of ribald, ripped from the headlines joke the staff loved in this era. Chief Wiggum's story about bumping into Krusty at an adult theatre, complete with a visual staging that winks at a notorious early 90s arrest and a taxi driver homage in the posture. Even Krusty's tossed-off film clip parodies during the special are little film nerd valentines, the kind of B-roll mayhem only a town like Springfield would consider family entertainment. And because this is the season that keeps adding texture, there's even a tiny guest voice cameo tucked into the Variety Hours flashbacks. Cast-wise, it's a quiet showcase. Yeardley Smith threads an impossible needle as Lisa, trying to be kind without leading someone on, and then holding a line without being cruel. Nancy Cartwright gives Ralph a small, clear voice that makes his goofy lines feel like a kid's defense mechanisms instead of one-liners. Hank Azaria's Chief Wiggum, using his badge to engineer a date for his son, and later to secure pageant prestige, is equal parts loving dad and oblivious cop, which is the exact Springfield mix that lets the satire land without souring the core. And Dan Castellaneta gets to undercut the schmaltz every time it threatens to curdle. Homer's clumsy parental advice, the living room play-by-play of Ralph's televised heartbreak, keeping the episode buoyant. There's real craft in the jokes you only clock on rewatch. The President's Day medley plays like a perfect school board compromise. Educational on paper, gloriously tacky in practice. The Pageant's Lincoln assassination gag manages to be both a Terminator 2 reference and a comment on how kids recycle whatever pop culture is handy. And the card puns land because they're dumb in exactly the way Kid Valentines are dumb. Big smiles, simple words, heavy feelings. The whole half hour sits in the sweet spot where the show's movie brat instincts, its school kid anthropology, and its musical chops all reinforce a single small human story. Behind the scenes, you can feel the team enjoying themselves. The writer's memory that planted the Choo Choo Choo's idea gives the episode its talisman. The song team turns a throwaway pageant into a track that later lands on the series' official albums, and Archer's board artists sell the embarrassment comedy with posture and micro-timing. How Ralph's shoulders lift when he thinks he's loved. How Lisa's jaw sets when she decides to be honest. Even the episode's placement in the schedule feels designed. A Valentine's parable followed a few weeks later by a different kind of love story, this one between a boy and his bicycle in Duffless. Season 4 knew exactly how to pace its heart. Audiences felt it in the moment. The broadcast pulled a 14.9 Nielsen and finished as Fox's highest rated show of the week, and the episode has floated in and out of best of lists ever since, often on the strength of that slow motion heartbreak, which critics still cite as one of those rare sitcom beats where you laugh and wince at the same time. That's the lasting trick here. It's a Valentine story from the kid's point of view that doesn't sneer at either kindness or boundaries. Lisa learns that pity can be cruel if it keeps pretending to be love. Ralph learns that rejection doesn't end you. And the town, being Springfield, turns it all into a show tune and a round of applause. If you cue it up now, it plays like a perfect little memory. Paper hearts, bad pageant wigs, the worst words a kind person has to say, and the best words a hurt person can hear. A choo-choo, a bee, and two kids who will still be in the same classroom tomorrow. A little wiser about how to be kind to each other without promising more than they can give. That's a Valentine that actually lasts. Duffless, Season 4, Episode 16 of The Simpsons, originally aired on February 18th, 1993. It starts with a lie Homer tells himself, and that jaunty little hum he does when he's up to no good. He's going to work, of course, by way of a Duff brewery tour, the kind of field trip that looked like grown-up Disneyland to the writers. David M. Stern built the story on that one bad decision and what it uncorks. A drunk driving bust. A month of sobriety that changes Homer more than he expects. And a side quest where Lisa tries to prove her brother is literally dumber than a hamster. Jim Reardon directs it like a 2-for-1. Boozy Americana on one track, kid science slapstick on the other. And the tone never wobbles. The blackboard insists, goldfish don't bounce. The family overshoots the film frame in the couch gag. And we're off. The brewery tour is where the episode shows its teeth. The Duff Guide shepherds the crowd past decades of proud advertising, Amos and Andy sponsorships, and a Kennedy-Nixon debate recut into a beer commercial. Little time capsule bits the crew loved for how perfectly they skewer Madison Avenue's memory. Then comes the factory floor gag every fan knows. 3 vats labelled Duff, Duff Light, and Duff Dry, all fed from the exact same pipe. The reveal is staged like a magician's prestige. The joke is that there's no magic at all. It's branding on tap, and Homer and Barney don't even blink. Back home, the other plotline gets its spark from a mess only siblings make. Lisa's original science fair project is an absurdly overachieving steroid tomato, and Bart can't resist weaponizing it right into Principal Skinner's backside. When the tomato splatters, Lisa pivots. At Marge's suggestion to try a hamster, she upgrades the idea with a little sisterly vengeance. Pit a hamster against Bart in a series of tests and see who learns faster. The writers lace that turn with a sly meta-joke. Lisa giggles and claims she was thinking of Herman's Head, a wink to Yeardley Smith's other Fox series at the time. And then the experiments begin. Equal parts kid cruel and scientifically tidy, they're designed so the rodent learns, and Bart does not. Meanwhile, the tour has a hangover. Wiggum's staking out the parking lot in a Beerstein costume. A phalanx of cops pounces. Homer's alphabet song impresses nobody. The breathalyzer's beep seals it. The quick march through consequences is classic season 4. Lionel Hutz materializes in the holding cell next door to sell his surprise witnesses strategy. The judge yanks Homer's license and assigns traffic school and Alcanon, and Marge slides into the role that keeps the story honest. She hands Homer a magazine quiz and asks him, plain as day, to give up beer for a month. He says yes. The way Dan Castellaneta plays that yes, sheepish, sincere, a little frightened, gives the rest of the episode its heartbeat. Stern and Reardon salt the sobriety montage with small, perfect humiliations. Homer rides Lisa's bicycle to work and gets heckled by Nelson. At the ballpark, without a beer in his hand, he realises baseball can be boring, and the play-by-play voice is pitched like a light Vin Scully impression, because of course it is. At home, he marks his calendar and notices the quiet wins. Pants fit better, pockets are heavier. The show isn't preaching, it's noticing. When Moe's sign flips between "Friends don't let friends drive drunk" and "It's always time for Duff," you get the writer's attitude in one visual gag. The culture says 2 contradictory things at once, and most of us pick the one we want in the moment. On the kids' science track, Lisa's hypotheses become cartoon set pieces. She designs parallel tests, a snack just out of reach, a lever that avoids a shock, and lets the subjects figure it out. The hamster pauses, explores, learns. Bart lunges, yelps, and lunges again. It's mean only if you've never had a sibling. For everyone else, it's painfully accurate. And the animators stage it with an eye for the little tells. The way Lisa can't quite hide how pleased she is to be right. The way Bart sets his jaw and keeps grabbing the cupcake anyway. Mike Royce admitted later they didn't want to show the shock gag on a kid, but the plot needed the contrast, so they kept it brief, clear, and silly. The Duff material keeps paying off. At traffic school, a Troy McClure film grinds along with that square, earnest tone only a Troy McClure film can muster, and Wiggum's anti-DUI slideshow is punctured by an accidental home movie of him eating a hot dog in a kiddie pool. Back at the plant, Homer's dehydrate fantasy sequence plays like a mini adventure movie. Cryptic map, cursed spider, a leap through a window. Because Reardon loves turning Homer's panic into physical comedy. And tucked in the corners are freeze-frame candies the staff left for obsessives. Vitty's vodka on a liquor shelf. Duff flavours like Lady Duff and Tartar Control Duff rattled off with deadpan pride. A calendar shot that looks exactly like an old Coke ad, swapped for beer. There's music lore here too. Mid-month, Homer slips into a little Sinatra parody, "It was a very good beer," crooning about teenage nights on a hill with a six-pack, and Queen on the radio. It's a send-up of "It was a very good year," lush strings and all, and it works because it isn't mocking the feeling, just the choice of beverage. And when we get to the end, the episode cashes in a bigger music joke. Homer makes it to day 30. He walks into Moe's, orders a beer, and really looks at his life, at Barney drooling on the bar, at the same old stool, and then he sets the glass down. He goes home, puts Marge on the handlebars of Lisa's bike, and pedals into a Butch Cassidy sunset while the two of them sing "Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head" with a little help from session ringer Kip Lennon. It's the show borrowing sweetness to end on something true. Sometimes love is choosing the bike over the bar. If you like the writer's room fingerprints, they're everywhere. The dream sequence Go Go Ray is a deliberate Johnny Quest riff the staff happily owned. Lisa's Help Me vision of a Bart hamster mashup is a one-shot homage to The Fly. The fake 1960 debate ad lifts a real Nixon line because it sounds funnier when a beer company uses it. And the sportscaster's cadence at the ballpark is tuned to Scully on purpose. A quiet hat tip slipped under a joke about sobriety making 9 innings feel like 19. These aren't references for their own sake. They're cultural breadcrumbs that keep the world of the episode feeling bigger than one family's month. Cast-wise, it's a tiny showcase. Phil Hartman gets to be everywhere at once. Lionel Hutz pitching legal miracles from inside a jail cell, and Troy McClure ushering us through square, sun-bleached educational film. And Marsha Wallace threads Edna Krabappel through the school chaos like only she could. Even the announcer at the baseball game becomes a character beat. His smooth excitement is a counterpoint to Homer's dry mouth. The craft is in how little the show needs to say. The month passes in sighs and sight gags. The kids arrive at the science fair with their projects. Martin's balloon, Nelson's BB gun booth, Bart's sham miracle about hamsters flying planes. And the ribbons land exactly where they shouldn't. That's Springfield. And because this season loves a last grace note, the final minute is quiet. Homer and Marge roll forward, shadows lengthening, singing a song that belongs to a different movie and feels perfect anyway. The writers have spent 22 minutes needling a fake beer brand, ribbing ad history, and turning a hamster into a straight man, and then, right at the end, they let a small domestic choice feel like a win. It's not puritanical, it's practical. Homer can drink again tomorrow. Tonight, he'd rather be with Marge. There's the episode's heart, simple as a calendar square, with a little X through it. Last exit to Springfield, Season 4, Episode 17 of The Simpsons, originally aired on March 11th, 1993. Is this the all-time Simpsons classic episode? The gold standard? It begins with a joke that doubles as a mission statement. A hyper-violent McBain scene that the crew could push further precisely because it was a movie inside the show. Then we smash to real Springfield, where Mr. Burns is cackling at a window washer clinging to life and deciding, for sport, to yank the plant's dental plan. That one management whim tumbles the whole town into a labour saga that's equal parts farce and folktale, and you can feel how deliberately the writers built it. Mike Rice sparked it with a simple, what if the plant actually went on strike? Jay Kogan and Wallace Wolodarski bolted on the dental plan hook, which in turn gives Lisa a personal stake, and Homer the dumbest, purest reason to become a hero. Dental plan. Lisa needs braces. Until the lights go on in his head. 30 long, glorious seconds later. Mark Kirkland directs the whole thing like a little epic, stuffing each act with set pieces that feel handmade. The union meets in that grandly named local, international brotherhood of jazz dancers, pastry chefs, and nuclear technicians. And in one of those perfect Springfield bargains, the workers nearly vote away their insurance for a free keg. Homer's brain finally connects the dots, and suddenly the guy who barely follows the agenda is at the microphone sounding like Joe Hill by accident. Kogan and Wolodarski loved that contradiction. Homer is both a boob and, in this one narrow lane, an uncorruptible union man because he's too dense to be bought. When Burns tries bribery with a velvet-gloved tour, the largest TV in the free world, a conservatory, and 1,000 monkeys at 1,000 typewriters, Homer keeps derailing the meeting to find the bathroom. Burns mistakes this for ruthless brinkmanship. The audience knows it's indigestion. Either way, it was the best of times, it was the blurst of times, lands in the canon with a crumpled page and a furious billionaire. Casting and near misses add extra flavour. The staff first chased heavyweights, Anthony Hopkins, Clint Eastwood, for Dr. Wolfe, Lisa's terrifying orthodontist, then actually booked Anthony Perkins before he passed away. Hank Azaria ultimately snarled the role, pitching it somewhere between kindly and unhinged. Elsewhere, the cameo you do here, Dr. Joyce Brothers bringing her own mic to Smartline, is almost a non-cameo, a quiet wink on a night stuffed with louder gags. The original plan was a different kind of headline. O.J. Simpson in that chair, which in hindsight makes everyone grateful for the swap. The dentist material is a small masterclass in cartoon menace. Lisa wants the invisible braces, of course. Without a plan, she gets what looks like 19th century farm equipment installed in her mouth. Dr. Wolfe's office weaponizes propaganda, the infamous Big Book of British Smiles, complete with a typo on the cover, to scare parents straight. Lisa's mirror shatters in a little Batman homage. Even the nitrous gag at the end is dialed to feel like a giggle you shouldn't be having in a medical chair. It's unsettling and very funny, which is the show's favourite setting. Because the A-plot is a labour fable, the episode lets itself be sweepingly referential without ever losing the thread. Burns and Smithers descend through a get-smart gauntlet of security and whirl through a Batman bookcase to throw the town into darkness. Burns quotes Moby Dick's Ahab as he kills the power. Springfield, instead of breaking, goes full Whoville and sings. Kirkland has said the Blackout Riot beat carried a little real-world sting. This was the era of Los Angeles in upheaval. And the Grinch parody turns that into a warm joke about resilience. Pull the plug, the town hums anyway. Then there's the music. You can tell how much the staff loved writing Lisa's Union Strike folk song. A campfire anthem with a kind of stubborn chorus kids remember forever. We'll march day and night by the big cooling tower. They have the plant, but we have the power. It's a perfect glue scene. It gives the line a reason to stick together, gives Lisa agency that isn't just sad child with medieval headgear, and it's catchy enough that the joke keeps working long after the credits. The jokes pile up without feeling like sketches. Grandpa filibusters the scabs with a story about onions on his belt, because that was the style at the time. 1930s, strikebreakers actually shamble off a bus in sepia. Burns thinks Homer is a brilliant tactician, because Homer loudly celebrates every concession at the exact wrong moment. The Union's old boss is mysteriously buried under a football field, a Hoffa nod in a single image. And over it all, Harry Shearer lets Burns forget Homer again and again. A series runner that becomes its own drumbeat. The rich man doesn't know the name of the person he's fighting. Behind the scenes, you can see how sure-handed the crew had become, and how chaotic it still felt from the inside. An ABC camera crew even filmed the rewrite room once, a decision Al Jean later regretted because they happened to catch the team doing stage direction instead of punch-ups. On TV, a jokeless minute looks like a crisis, even if 5 killers arrive 10 minutes later. Kirkland talks about the episode as one of the craziest he's ever wrangled. So many parodies, so many fantasies, so much story. And that controlled sprawl is exactly what the finished half hour radiates. If you want the tiny craft notes, they're everywhere. The blackboard says mud is not one of the 4 food groups, telegraphing the cafeteria fight to come. The couch sprouts tentacles and devours the family. A small promise that tonight's physics will be rubbery. Burns's house tour plants gags the show will pluck for decades. The infinite monkey blurst of times bit never stops being funny. And the strike's visuals are staged so that the cooling towers feel like cathedral spires over a picket line. This is one of those rare episodes where you could freeze on almost any frame and see a choice. And because this is season 4, the show lands a giant civic story with a domestic button. Burns caves on the dental plan if Homer quits. Homer, thrilled, quits before the sentence ends. It's not clever strategy. It's a dad who got the thing his kid needed and now wants to go home. Lisa gets the good braces. The family laughs a little too hard in a room pumped full of nitrous oxide. Roll credits. It reads like a parody of old sitcom endings. Everyone chuckling in a chemically enhanced freeze. But the emotion lands anyway, because the episode never once forgot why the fight started. Some stats and folklore on the way out. It pulled a 13.7 Nielsen and topped Fox that week. Critics have spent decades calling it the series' best, sometimes the best in television period. And the oral histories circle back to the same thesis. This is the show at full tilt, merciless and warm in the same breath. The title tips its cap to Last Exit to Brooklyn. The jokes careen from Get Smart to The Grinch to The Three Stooges. And Homer accidentally becomes the kind of labour hero who would never use the word hero. One stubborn chorus, one scary orthodontist, one idiot with his heart in the right place. That's the episode. So it's come to this. A Simpsons clip show. Season 4. Episode 18. Originally aired on April 1st, 1993. It starts with the show leaning into the calendar, April Fool's Day, and Homer waking up full of mischief. He blindfolds Bart with tape before the kids even out of bed, parks a carton of milk next to the radiator to turn it into a science experiment, and spends the morning cackling at his own prankster genius. Bart takes it on the chin until he doesn't. He hauls a Duff can to a hardware store paint shaker, cranks the thermostat so Dad will be good and thirsty, and waits by the fridge like Wile E. Coyote with a detonator. One pull of the tab and the house practically vaporizes. Homer rockets to the hospital, and a vending machine mishap tips him into a coma. That's the frame. A father on ice, a family at bedside, and a flood of memories that double as the series' first official clip show. The clip show part wasn't a gag so much as triage. By early '93, the staff was exhausted. Fox wanted as many episodes as they could wring out of the factory, and somebody floated a plan for multiple clip shows a season. The creative team balked. The compromise was to do one, and to make it feel like an episode. Fresh spine, real stakes, rather than a string of reruns. So John Vitti built a new story that puts Homer in peril, and Bart in a confessional. Carlos Baeza staged it like a regular half hour, and the animators filled an act and a half with new material to keep the thing breathing. It's one of those commercial pressure meets stubborn pride moments that shaped this era. Yes, the show caught a breather. No, it wasn't going to phone it in. You can hear the production machine humming under the jokes. Vitti writes Homer and Bart as a vaudeville duo. One long setup, one spectacular comeuppance. Then hands the baton to Marge, Lisa, and even Mr. Burns for bedside business. Baeza keeps cutting from memory to present with a doctor's timing. A gag lands, the heart monitor beeps. We're back to the room. The details are season 4 sharp. Blackboard reads, "No one is interested in my underpants." The couch gag scrambles everyone's heads onto the wrong bodies, and the network airdate trick of premiering on April 1st means the episode gets to be a prank about pranks. The staff didn't just shuffle greatest hits, they remixed them. The famous gorge jump from Bart the Daredevil comes back with a twist. For years, people swore a lost shot existed of Homer tumbling all the way down a second time after the ambulance crashes. It wasn't lost at all. The new piece was created for this show, so the gag lands even harder when you've already seen the first fall. They also mount a rapid-fire montage, 30 plus in a row, lifted from a reel David Silverman used to show on college visits, now repurposed as a kind of Homer hymn. Those choices make the nostalgia feel active, not lazy. The other new business is gleefully dark. A candy machine topples onto Homer and knocks him out cold. Burns, ever thrifty, tries to unplug life support to save on insurance. Barney wanders through whether he really needs a girlfriend, a side that winks at One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Professor Frink proposes shrinking a team to voyage inside Homer, a tidy, fantastic voyage nod. The hour even flashes the show's film geek grin in little staging flourishes that feel, for a second, like Raiders of the Lost Ark by way of a hospital corridor. It's a sampler plate of the series' reference diet, but it's all there to serve the character joke. Springfield can't help being Springfield even in a crisis. Standards and practices got their fingerprint on this one too. The public service announcement that tees up Bart's revenge. Excessive alcohol consumption can cause liver damage and cancer of the rectum was a fight. Censors frowned at the wording until the producers showed them a medical text spelling out the link. And even then the notes came back with a polite, go easy on beer nudge. In classic Simpsons fashion, the warning immediately turns into a joke. Homer hears cancer, says, beer, and opens the booby-trapped can. That snap from seriousness to stupidity is the show's favourite magic trick. For all the elbow jabs, the episode's centre is surprisingly tender. With Homer unresponsive, Bart slumps into the bedside chair and, over the beep of the monitor, tells his father what he won't admit to anyone else. I did it. I'm sorry. He recounts their good times in clips, because that's how memory works on a kid. You see your life as reruns. And then he blurts the truth. It's the one thing guaranteed to wake Homer up. The instinctive lunge and strangling hands of an annoyed dad. Marge, Lisa, and even Maggie smile, because strangling Bart is, in this universe, a weird confirmation of life. 7 weeks have passed, the family says. He's lost 5% of his brain, and Homer's still Homer. It's a punchline, and it's oddly moving. There's a little meta-text humming underneath. The montage choices skew to themes. Homer's injuries, Homer's donuts, Homer's screw-ups, because the show is quietly cataloguing itself for the first time. What survives your memory from the early years? The electroshock family therapy, the land of chocolate, a rabbit trap that whips back and smacks you. In that sense, the episode functioned like a scrapbook the staff assembled for an audience that, in 1993, didn't have DVDs or streaming to rewatch on demand. It says, here's what we've been. Here's why people shout the quotes at us in airports. Because this is season 4, there's also a stray brush with future lore. Years later, a fan theory would make the rounds that Homer never woke up. That every episode after this one is a coma dream, explaining the weirder celebrity cameos and surreal turns to come. It's a nifty story, and the show even gave it oxygen with that 7 weeks gag. But the folks in charge have swatted it down with a smile. The appeal of the theory tells you something true, though. Even the show's joke episodes land with enough emotional clarity that people want to weave a myth around them. If you like your ephemera tidy, the night it aired it topped Fox with a 14.9 and landed in the week's top 15, not bad for a half hour that announces itself as recycled. And yet, the response that sticks is the one you hear from fans who first saw it as kids. This was their introduction to the show's own back catalogue, a gateway to go hunting for the one with the gorge, the one with the electroshock, the one with the land of chocolate. It's a clip show that made people more devoted, not less. The best behind-the-scenes grace note might be the tiniest. When Bart tries to shout April or over the roaring beer can blast, the cut swallows the word. Years later, that little blackout still cues a laugh in rooms full of people who can lip-sync the rest from memory. The joke worked, the breather worked, and the staff, overworked, stubborn, show-tune humming perfectionists, proved they could turn a format nobody loves into something that feels like a real story. If you want to relive the April Fool's detonation itself, there's even a little video snippet floating around that drops you right back in front of the fridge with Homer, which is fitting. This one's a refrigerator episode. You pull out what you need, close the door, and keep reaching for it years later. The Front, Season 4, Episode 19 of The Simpsons, originally aired on April 15th, 1993. Here's the fun of this one. It's a sweet little showbiz fable about Bart and Lisa discovering that if the grown-ups won't take you seriously, you can always borrow a grown-up's name. After they sit through a clunker of an itchy and scratchy episode, the kids decide they can do better. They hammer out Little Barbershop of Horrors, inspired by Homer accidentally snipping a lock of Marge's hair, and mail it off to studio boss Roger Myers Jr., who tosses it with a sneer once he notices it came from children. So they resubmit under Grandpa's name. Suddenly, the exact same script is a hit. Abe gets hired as a staff writer, and an elderly man who has never watched a single cat mutilation gag in his life is holding court in a cartoon writer's room. The joke plays beautifully because it's rooted in a real behind-the-scenes story. Freelance writer Adam I. Lapidus saw a news report about 3 8th graders whose Tiny Toon Adventure script actually got produced, and he thought that would really be a neat idea for Bart and Lisa. He wrote a spec, James L. Brooks passed it along, and the staff brought him in to make the episode. It remains Lapidus's only Simpsons credit, and he jokes that for a while fans wondered if he even existed. Rich Moore directs this like a love letter to the weird, frantic corners of animation production. When Bart and Lisa first walk into Itchy and Scratchy's writer's lounge, the writers lounging around are caricatures of the actual Simpsons crew. A Harvard man who looks suspiciously like John Vitti gets fired on the spot. One of many little in-jokes about how cartoons really get written. Moore's team even mimics a Stephen J. Cannell-style tag for the Itchy and Scratchy credits, with Scratchy ripping a page from a typewriter and flipping it into a logo, while the tiny credits themselves are basically the Simpsons credits copied over. It's the series peeking out from behind its own curtain, and then laughing at what it sees. Grandpa's arc turns into a tidy satire of taste. The old man hasn't watched a frame of Itchy and Scratchy, so when he finally sees a nominee reel at a swanky cartoon award show, co-presented by a deadpan Brooke Shields and an instantly irritated Krusty, he's appalled, and then he wins. His acceptance speech? He condemns the violence and the audience who loves it. Food flies. A security shuffle ensues. Back at the home, Grandpa hands the trophy to the real authors and goes back to playing the clothespin over a bottle game. It's such a clean punchline. To take credit for the kid's work, all he had to do was not watch it. The minute he looks, he can't stand it. Threaded through that is a pure Homer B plot that lets the show slip into another corner of Springfield life. At the Class of 74 reunion, Homer wins a pile of novelty awards and then gets them yanked when Principal Dondelinger reveals a technicality. Homer never actually graduated. He failed remedial science. The embarrassment is immediate and total. So he drags himself to the adult education annex, studies, mangles the Pythagorean theorem with the sum of the squares of the sides of an isosceles triangle, and, after a few pratfalls, passes the exam and finally graduates. The detail I love here is how specific the world building is. This episode quietly debuts the annex as a real Springfield place, complete with a whole vibe of scuffed floors and night-class defeat giving way to second chances. And Dondelinger? His name came from someone the producers actually knew, because of course it did. There's a bit of mischief with the censors tucked inside the animation tour sequences too. A Bart fantasy about hijacking Santa's sleigh with a machine gun raised eyebrows and had to be handled carefully. And a darker beat, animators studying a real cat and then slipping dynamite into its mouth off screen, was cut entirely for implied animal cruelty. You can still see how the corridor scene around it is staged to set up the blast. The joke was never realism. It was poking at the industrial silliness of making violent slapstick responsibly. Because this is season 4, the episode finds time for a couple of lovely meta flourishes. Artie Ziff swings through the reunion for a cameo, but it isn't John Lovett's voicing him. He was unavailable, so Dan Castellaneda filled in, which is why Artie sounds just a hair off to eagle-eared fans. And if you freeze frame the awards audience, you'll spot Matt Groening himself. Even Krusty's onstage meltdown, snapping at a joke in the teleprompter, feels like the kind of backstage war story the writers probably watched at some awards show and saved for later. And then, when the main story is done, the show does something delightfully odd. It tacks on a complete non sequitur called The Adventures of Ned Flanders. It's a 60-second mini-pilot with a title card and its own theme, Love That God, dropped in because the cut ran short, and they'd already squeezed every other trick to fill time. That tiny Flanders short turned out to be weirdly influential. A few seasons later, it inspired the staff to build an entire episode out of stitched together town vignettes. 22 short films about Springfield. A time filler became a format. That's this era in a nutshell. Under the hood, the front, is also a little valentine to how ideas bounce around TV. The title nods to the 1976 film about fronts who took credit for blacklisted writers. But here, the gag has a kid logic twist. Bart and Lisa front through Grandpa simply because power won't listen to children. The in-jokes about Harvard writers and studio corridors that look suspiciously like Disney's are the crew kidding themselves, while the kids' script, a barber douses Scratchy's head in barbecue sauce and unleashes flesh-eating ants, lands because it's exactly what a pair of bright, slightly evil siblings would invent. The show is laughing at the business and cheering for the kids at the same time. It also, quietly, did numbers. The broadcast pulled a 12.5 Nielsen and ranked highest on Fox that week, which is a nice confirmation that even an inside baseball satire about TV writing can play like a family story when you keep the emotion simple. The kids want to be heard. The dad wants not to be humiliated. The grandpa wants a nap. As for Lapidus, the experience launched him into a TV career and a lifetime of fielding the question, wait, are you a real person? He is. And somewhere in a college lecture hall, a professor is still telling the story of how Bart and Lisa helped kick off his career. Finally, a little production candy to leave you with. The blackboard reads, I will not sell miracle cures. The couch gag explodes into a Busby Berkeley kick line, with the theme briefly quoting Entry of the Gladiators. And the end credits for the kids' Itchy and Scratchy episode are a perfect miniature of the show's own credits, right down to the typewriter page turns into a logo flourish. It's a half hour that lets you peek into the machine and then sends you back out the door humming, which feels exactly right for an episode about two kids who wrote something good and had to smuggle it into the grown-ups world to get it made. Wacking Day, Season 4, Episode 20 of The Simpsons, originally aired on April 29th, 1993. On paper, it sounds like a mean little holiday. Every May 10th, the town drives snakes to the square and clubs them, but the episode was built to turn that meanness inside out. It's a 2-track story. Bart gets himself expelled and discovers he can actually learn something when Marge homeschools him. And Lisa decides she has done watching Springfield celebrate cruelty in the name of tradition. The glue is that newly curious, Bart notices a crack in the town's history. Jebediah Springfield couldn't have founded Wacking Day on the same day he was allegedly leading the assault on Fort Ticonderoga. And, together with Lisa, he helps the town see the holiday for what it is. That's the framework. The joy is in how the show fills it with jokes that ping between newsreels, Itchy and Scratchy, and a bass line deep enough to make a snake shimmy. The seed for all of this came from The Room, specifically George Meyer, who loved the idea of using a cartoon to argue against animal mistreatment. He'd read about real-life rattlesnake roundups. Yes, the Texas kind, with sticks and gasoline, and pushed a staff to tackle the subject head-on. John Swartzwelder took the assignment and wrote it in his dry, efficient way. The first act ended up unusually short, roughly 10 script pages, because the team couldn't find much more to do before the holiday itself began. Director Jeff Lynch, facing a production sprint, begged storyboard artists to jump in and help. The nervous part was never the schedule. It was whether an episode full of whacking snakes would be misunderstood when the point was to stop the whacking. It's also the episode that introduces Superintendent Gary Chalmers, the ideal foil for Principal Skinner's brittle dignity. The name came from the writers kicking around what a boss above Skinner might sound like, and once Harry Shearer and Hank Azaria got in the booth, the two discovered a rhythm so natural that bits of their back and forth were ad-libbed. You can hear the pairing clicking immediately, Chalmers inspecting the sandbox and pronouncing, "Excellent." Not a trace of urine sets the tone for a career of exasperated Skinner to come. Casting gives the story its heart. Barry White, who genuinely wanted to be on the show, shows up as himself and instantly refuses to lend his celebrity to a slaughter. Instead, his voice becomes the lifeline. The joke is simple and beautiful. Lisa and Bart turn Homer's speakers face down, and White sings "Can't Get Enough of Your Love, Babe," letting that low, buttery register vibrate the earth and lure the snakes into safety. It's also a little production flex. White didn't just sign off on a needle drop. He recorded for the show. And the town, which welcomed him as Larry White, because of course it did, gets a public scolding from a man they thought was there to party. Before we get there, the episode takes the scenic route through Bart's expulsion and a sly love letter to children's books and field trips. Chalmers is visiting. Skinner hides the bad kids in a basement under the promise of free mountain bikes, and Bart tunnels out via airshaft, only to joyride Willie's tractor straight into the superintendent's backside. Expelled and summarily rejected from a private Christian school, Bart winds up at Marge's kitchen table, where a single hook, Johnny Tremaine's maimed hand, pulls him into a book and turns him briefly into a student. Marge even takes him to old Springfield town, where a dusty slide lecture accidentally hands Bart the clue that undoes the whole holiday myth. Over in the episode's sketchbook corner, Itchy and Scratchy gets an Oliver Stone presents JFK parody, complete with a shouted "get his gun" ending, just because the writers could. There are a couple of delicious production war stories tucked into the middle. The flashback where Grandpa recalls posing as a German cabaret singer during World War II was originally meant to feature Lily Marlene, but the rights holders wouldn't play ball because everybody makes fun of it, so the crew swapped into different music and kept the visual silliness. And in the room, Conan O'Brien pitched pieces of that Abe in Drag memory, proof that the series' best stray gags often grew from someone's single, specific image. These aren't the kinds of tales that change the plot. They're the kind that tell you how handmade the show still felt, even on a deadline. When Whacking Day arrives, the satire sharpens. Kent Brockman's Archive of Tradition trods out Richard Nixon as Honorary Grand Marshal. After exposing Alger Hiss, he goes after another deadly hiss. And the choirmaster leads kids in a carol. Oh, Whacking Day. That's just O Tannenbaum, with the lyrics sharpened into a chant for snake skull cracking. Bob Woodward, of all people, appears as the author of The Truth About Wacking Day, because in Springfield, even Watergate's chronicler will take a gig debunking a fake holiday. And, in the middle of the town square, Mayor Quimby does what he does best. Ride a mob until it turns on him, then call his constituents a pack of fickle mushheads, while they cheer the accuracy of the insult. Barry White's disgust gives Lisa the opening she needs, and Bart adds the missing argument. The holiday's origin story is a lie. It wasn't a noble frontier ritual. It was an excuse, decades later, to beat up Irish immigrants. A mean little joke to show punctures, with one sheepish "'tis true" from an old-timer. Springfield decides, for once, to let mercy win. Snakes slip across a living room floor to the thump of a bass line. Born Free plays one of its funniest cue-ups, and the crowd, momentarily human, agrees to stop the tradition. As small finales go, that one is tidy. A singer's voice redeems a town. A sister's stubbornness saves a species. And a brother's new habit of actually reading things gets him back into school. The episode's reputation rests partly on how deftly it skewers crowds. Fans often call it the show's purest attack on mob mentality. How quickly a town will chant for blood, then chant for compassion, and congratulate itself both times. You see the point without being preached at, because the jokes are bright. The newsreel pomp, the church sign jabs at fundamentalist dogma. The way Quimby can pivot from Grand Marshal to booed villain to applauded truth-teller in a single scene. And, yes, if you came of age with this half hour, you probably still hear Homer's "I am evil Homer" fantasy bouncing in your head. Even Matt Groening has singled it out as an all-timer. Then there's the footprint it left outside the show. In ratings, it was Fox's top performer that week. In the real world, it picked up a Genesis Award for raising consciousness about animal issues. Years later, journalists would point to archival records of an honest-to-God whacking day in colonial Eastchester, New York, where a springtime rattlesnake call was written into the town's business. And, on the other side of the globe, North Queensland's Toad Day Out, a cane toad roundup that humanely euthanises a devastating invasive species, has cheerfully admitted the episode as an inspiration. An animated protest turned into a couple of real ones, however messy real life can be. What holds it together, though, is how lived in it feels. The classroom politics, Skinner's basement trick with the fake mountain bikes, Chalmers' performative inspection, are petty and recognisable. The family stuff, Marge finding the one detail that gets Bart to read, Lisa stubbornly standing up for creatures most people fear, is quiet and true. And the cartooning is just so confident. An itchy and scratchy JFK riff, because why not? A town square carol sung with the gusto of a Christmas pageant. A single celebrity guest who uses his power to say no. By the time Skinner remembers, with a gulps, that he left 4 bullies locked in the basement overnight, the message has landed without anyone delivering a speech. Whacking Day starts with a club and ends with a song. And along the way it sneaks in a little civic lesson about how traditions get made, and unmade, when someone finally reads the fine print. Marge in Chains, Season 4, Episode 21 of The Simpsons, originally aired on May 6th, 1993. The heatwave hits Springfield, the ads get dumber, and everybody gets sick. Everybody except Marge. That's the kickoff. A gloriously trashy infomercial for the Juice Loosener starring Troy McClure, and Dr. Nick convinces the town to buy a chattering, useless juicer. And somewhere on an Osaka packing line, a worker coughs into a box and seeds Springfield with the flu. The show rushes this with cartoon efficiency. The green germ clouds even pause at stoplights, and then slows down to a human beat. Marge, alone, takes care of 4 miserable people until the kindness wears her to the nub. That's when she forgets to pay for a single bottle of bourbon at the Quickie Mart, and the town that depends on her decides she's a criminal. The whole episode pivots on that tiny human mistake. It's the first staff script by Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein, and you can feel them testing how much real life the show can hold. They were handed the core premise, Marge gets arrested, and shaped it into a dual satire. A city without its glue, and a justice system that cares more about spectacle than truth. Jim Reardon directs with a knack for tidy set pieces. Burns' hermetically sealed chamber gag. Homer happily eating a sandwich inside. The town hall panic about placebos, and a courtroom where Lionel Hutz tries to bluff his way through a case and only realises halfway through that he isn't wearing pants. The Osaka flu has become infamous for reasons the writers didn't anticipate. In 2020, when people started posting split screens about predictions, Oakley waved off the prophecy talk and pointed back to history. The shipping line gag was a quick joke, inspired by the 1968 Hong Kong flu and the way anxieties travel through commerce. That's why the scene plays like a newsreel and a cough at the same time. It's not futurism. It's pattern recognition made silly. Even the riot over placebos is the same kind of joke. The crowd wants a cure so badly that they'll overturn anything labelled medicine, and of course they unleash a box of killer bees. If you love the show's production fingerprints, this half hour is loaded. Oakley and Weinstein's first draft was more grounded. They'd done real research into women's prisons before the team dialed it back towards Springfield logic. And they peppered the soundtrack and TV screens with the crew's beloved junk media. Quack ads, fake news crawls, and a glorious "I can't believe they invented it" segment that lets Phil Hartman's McClure sell, grin, and shrug in under a minute. Reardon keeps the camera confident and fast. The cuts let the satire breathe without ever bogging down in issue-episode speechifying. Some of the fun comes from how carefully the room chases specificity. For the brief exchange of Hindi between Apu and Sanjay at the counter, the writers actually called the Embassy of India in Washington to get a proper translation. And tucked into the prison wing is a pure cartoonist's delight. Tattoo Annie's back doubles as a mad-style fold-in. A little Valentine to print-era humour cannily smuggled into primetime. The show is always collecting odd textures like that, tiny real details next to elastic gags, because it makes the world feel lived in, even when it's bending reality. Cast is destiny here. Julie Kavner plays Marge's exhaustion like a frayed piano string, every a little thinner than the last. So when she's arrested, the joke lands and the ache does too. Phil Hartman turns Lionel Hutz into the episode's metronome, bouncing from swagger to panic to shameless salesmanship. Works on contingency? No, money down. In a handful of scenes. And then there's the slyest guest of the year, David Crosby as himself, answering Hutz's payphone call for AA support. It's one line, it's ridiculous, and it makes Hutz feel like a real person with a program he's barely holding on to. Meanwhile, Springfield behaves exactly like Springfield. The trial is a gossip column in robes. Helen Lovejoy turns character assassination into community service. Professor Frink wheels out the Zapruder film to implicate Marge in Dallas. Judge Snyder stares down a lawyer who tries to dismiss the case by removing his tie. When the guilty verdict lands and Marge is sent to Springfield Women's Prison, the fallout is immediate and petty. The house disintegrates in record time. An alligator in the toilet, dinners eaten over the sink, Homer emerging from the attic in a wedding dress because laundry broke the food chain, and the annual park bake sale collapses without Marge's marshmallow squares, leaving the city too broke to buy a Lincoln statue. They settle for Jimmy Carter, and the town riots because he's history's greatest monster. That ludicrous anger is the point. Without Marge, the place loses not just good cookies, but basic perspective. Reardon dots the prison story with quick, sticky images. A psycho peephole gag with Maud looking in from the church world. A conjugal trailer tip-over with Homer. Tattoo Annie's folding back. While the family plot keeps reminding you what Marge does that no one else does. It isn't the chores exactly, it's the sense. Bart and Lisa are still themselves, but without their mum, the ambient misbehaviour of Springfield rises like heat. Mayor Quimby announces he's cancelled his tropical vacation while literally standing on a beach. Chief Wiggum spreads news from a sauna. The episode never needs a sermon. It just shows a town of overgrown children missing the adult in the room. Off-screen, the writers were also quietly flexing. This was the period when the show loved dropping in hand-built miniatures of American culture. The kind of jokes you'd recognise 10 years later on DVD, and this one is stacked. Burns's Get Smart style security doors opening to reveal plain old Homer. A perfect TV news panic cadence for Kent Brockman's flu coverage, and a crowd scene that plays mob psychology for laughs and truth at once. On the commentary track years later, the team even laughed about how their realistic research kept getting replaced by cleaner, funnier choices. A rhythm that would define their later, deeper runs on the show. And then they bring Marge home the way the show always should, with a small civic pivot and a warm, stupid flourish. Quimby, spooked by the riot and the polls, arranges an early release. The town that branded her a thief throws a parade and reveals a new statue that is just Jimmy Carter with Marge's hair. It's Springfield to the bone, vain, cheap, and accidentally sweet, and the family's relief is the real ending. Marge doesn't need to scold anyone. She steps back into the house and order flickers back on like a hallway light. That's the thesis the episode sneaks in beneath the flu gags and courtroom pratfalls. She isn't just the mum, she's the weather system that keeps this strange little town livable. And if you're listening for ephemera, the hour hums, the blackboard reads, "I do not have diplomatic immunity." The couch gag shrinks the family to action figure size, and the episode quietly lands on video later in a crime and punishment set, as if the town had learned the moral and boxed it for sale. Even the prediction discourse became a kind of postscript, a reminder that the show's job wasn't to see the future, but to notice the present so precisely that it feels prophetic later. On that score, Marge in Chains does what Season 4 did better than anyone. It takes a simple domestic wobble, spins it into a town-wide farce, and ends with a small human correction that makes the whole world feel right again. Krusty Gets Cancelled, Season 4, Episode 22 of The Simpsons, originally aired on May 13th, 1993. What knocks the clown off his pedestal isn't a scandal or a slump, it's a billboard. Gabbo is coming, the town whispers, and pretty soon a ventriloquist and his preternaturally nimble dummy eat Krusty's lunch, his time slot, and his audience. That elegantly simple premise, rise, fall, comeback, came from writer John Swartzwelder, with David Silverman directing and Al Jean and Mike Rice steering the season. You can feel the room deciding to make the fall big and the comeback bigger, right down to the production codes 9F19 and the closing night energy of a season ender. Gabbo himself is an in-joke matryoshka. The name nods to the 1929 film The Great Gabbo. The face leans toward a demented Howdy Doody. The voice borrows the frantic elasticity of Jerry Lewis. Even his fatal on-air gaffe, muttering about these kids when he thinks the mic is off, comes from an old broadcaster's urban legend about a kiddie show host who forgot the red light was still on. And when Krusty tries to plug the hole with Worker and Parasite, the crew's parody of a jerky Soviet cartoon, Silverman literally roughened the footage, Xeroxed drawings, stuttered motion, so it would feel like a station director grabbed the weirdest thing in the library 5 minutes before airtime. The visual grammar is the joke. Behind the curtain, this one was a white-knuckle booking spree. After the baseball player jamboree in Homer at the Bat, the writers wanted to try a celebrity-heavy show. They dusted off a list of stars who'd said, "Call me any time," and then watched several of them vanish when they actually called. An early dream of landing a living ex-president fizzled. Everyone politely declined. And there were enough last-minute changes that the comeback special section nearly got scrapped. The save came from the guests, who did say yes, each with a condition that shaped the comedy. Johnny Carson didn't want to be portrayed as a mooch or a has-been, so they swung in the opposite direction and made him a one-man vaudeville aria while balancing a Buick, accordion while keeping two old men aloft. Bette Midler agreed on the promise that they'd bake her anti-littering crusade right into the show. Suddenly, the comeback special had a spine. Let the clown's famous friends be the story. And as a little bit of television history, it's also one of Carson's few post-Tonight Show TV appearances. The rarity becomes part of the thrill. No guest cameo has aged better than the Red Hot Chili Peppers sequence, because it captures perfectly the way TV tames rock. Krusty leans in with the network's note about Give It Away, and the band bristles until he pitches the gentlest possible fix. Swap the raunch for "What I'd like is I'd like to hug and kiss you." The band shrugs. They've done worse. And that's the joke. You can't sell Rebellion in primetime without a little soft shoe. The scene deliberately echoes Ed Sullivan's attempts to sanitize the Doors and the Stones, and the episode even poses the Chili Peppers like Oliver Stone's doors for the dressing room bit. It's a tiny rock history seminar smuggled into a kid's show about a clown. Luke Perry's bit is a different flavour of sugar. The writers make him Krusty's half-brother on the spot, sideshow Luke Perry, and then subject him to the most Springfield form of nepotism. He's launched from a cannon through a sandpaper museum and jars of acid at the Quick E-Mart before landing in a pillow factory that is instantly demolished. It's a spectacularly mean runner, but it works because Perry plays it like the good-natured pretty boy he was, and because the show keeps cutting back to Krusty, beaming with familial pride. "You're my half-brother and my projectile." It's all heart and foam rubber. Hugh Hefner gets a quieter flex. He sits down with stemware and plays the Peter and the Wolf theme on tuned wine glasses. It's such a serene, silly image, Playboy's patriarch as a parlour trick musician, that it underlines the comeback special's design. Each guest brings their own miniature acts, and Krusty borrows their glow. And Carson's feats are staged to feel like live TV miracles. The 87 Buick Skylark overhead while he croons the habanera. The easy slide into Goodnight Ladies on accordion during the after party at Moe's. You're supposed to laugh at the absurdity, sure, but you're also supposed to feel the pull of show business. If Johnny still has it, maybe Krusty does too. The episode keeps its movie nerd pulse beating, even as it stacks cameos. Krusty rehearses Send in the Clowns, a sad clown standard, in shots that were tricky enough Silverman farmed parts of the sequence to Brad Bird. The big special itself borrows staging from Elvis's '68 comeback. While Bart and Lisa hustle invites, we peek into Krusty's past via photos with exactly the old Hollywood faces you'd expect. Elizabeth Taylor, who'd voiced Maggie earlier that season, gets a one-line gag from the other side, turning down the special on an agent's advice she immediately regrets. The animators have a blast with the margins, Worker and Parasite wobbling like it was edited with a butter knife. Gabbo's airplane show intro with fireworks and precision jets that somehow come from a puppet. The glint in Krusty's eye when he realises a comeback isn't a miracle, it's logistics. And because this is the show's meanest sweetheart era, the satire always lands on character. Bart and Lisa aren't just fans here. They're production assistants, publicists, and crisis managers because they want to see their clown get one more shot. Krusty isn't humbled so much as reminded of what he can still do when a red light starts blinking. Even Gabbo's downfall is engineered with a child's sense of justice. Bart catches the puppet's master, calling kids SOBS when he thinks the mic is off. In a lovely pointed beat, the town shrugs at the scandal 5 minutes later. The machine keeps churning, but there's enough oxygen for the comeback to catch, and that's all our heroes need. On the night, it all played like an event. The broadcast pulled a 12.3 Nielsen and topped Fox for the week. Not bad for a finale that is half industry parody, half variety show. Critics have kept it in the canon ever since. The episode pops up on best of lists as the platinum example of how to stuff a cartoon with famous people and still make the famous people serve the cartoon. And if you watch closely, you can see why the crew remembers it as chaos that turned into a victory lap. The guests who balked shaped the tone. The guests who came saved the day. And the animators stitched it all together with a Soviet cat and mouse and a sad clown song. It all there in Krusty's last bow with Bette Midler on Wind Beneath My Wings. A clown rescued by friends. A town that really just wants a good show. And a season that knows exactly how to close the curtain.